Chapter 483. Practicing martial arts in the secular world or cultivation among cultivators is a way to improve the stability of the soul. But the progress of the latter is incomparable to that of the former. Nongju tapped on the armrest of the rattan chair with her slender fingers and said leisurely, "It's not unreasonable to cultivate step by step. The main purpose of the qi refining stage is to nourish the body with spirit stones until the body can bear the tempering." Tempering? How to do that? I haven't. Yu Qianqiu said anxiously, as if he was worried that he had missed something good. Tempering is the Zhuji realm. You haven't gone through the Zhuji realm? Nongju turned around and said indifferently, "Don't tell me you directly jumped from the qi refining stage to the yuanying stage." Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly, "So it's the Zhuji realm." Yes. How could I directly jump to the yuanying stage? Nongju rolled her eyes at him and closed her eyes again. She said, "The cultivation of the qi refining stage is to prepare for the Zhuji realm. Otherwise you will die if you force it. If you don't believe me, you can bring a mortal here and let him take a foundation-laying pill. I'm sure the pill is more poisonous than poison and he will die immediately." Yu Qianqiu didn't doubt this. He had personally experienced the pain of the Zhuji realm. Ordinary people couldn't bear it at all. A foundation-laying pill would definitely kill them. After stepping into the foundation establishment stage, you've truly stepped into the doorstep of cultivation. What is the Zhuji realm? The Zhuji realm is to lay a good foundation for cultivation, which is also very important. Otherwise, it is impossible to extract the 3 souls and 7 spirits from the body to form the core. Nongju opened one eye and waved a finger at Yu Qianqiu. She said, "Without the qi refining stage in the Zhuji realm, an ordinary person will definitely die if he forcibly extracts the 3 souls and 7 spirits. Because once the soul leaves the blood, flesh and meridians of the ordinary person, the person is already dead." You mean, after cultivating to the Zhuji realm, the core in the body is condensed by the 3 souls and 7 spirits? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. He had never heard of such a thing before. So this was what core formation was all about. It seemed there were some things that were difficult for people at other levels to know. To be more precise, core formation is turning the formless into the tangible. It's condensing the 3 souls and 7 spirits in the body into tangible objects. Nongju smiled leisurely and said, "Bearing essence is like incubating an egg. When the egg hatches and matures, your nascent soul will break out of the shell. In other words, a life soul. Now do you know what a life soul is?" So that's how it is. The life soul is indeed the nascent soul. Yu Qianqiu asked eagerly, "What about the other 2 souls and 7 spirits? Where are they?" That's not right. Didn't you say that core formation is formed by the condensation of the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls? Why did it only hatch a life soul and nothing else? You can't become fat with just one bite. If I want to see the other 2 souls and 7 spirits, I naturally have to continue cultivating. Nongju raised her hand and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's abdomen and said, "The life soul you see now is actually the 3 souls and 7 physical souls in one body. Have you noticed that your nascent soul is like an unconscious fetus, forever in a deep sleep?" Yes. I've never seen it open its eyes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "It's right that you haven't seen it open its eyes. Once it opens its eyes, it means that it has woken up and your cultivation has reached the crossing calamity stage." Nongju explained, "Your current cultivation is still in the nascent soul stage, which is the stage when the nascent soul fetus matures. When it wakes up and you enter the crossing calamity stage, that is the growth period of the baby. And the final stage of the crossing calamity stage is the sign that the baby has grown into an adult." Yu Qianqiu said, "That is to say, even at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage I can only see the life soul but not the other souls?" Yes. Nongju nodded slightly and said, "Why is the life soul called the life soul? Because it is the first life soul to be born, and the other 2 souls and 7 physical souls will also be born from it. When you can see the life soul in your dantian giving birth to the heavenly soul, it means that the nascent soul in your body has grown up and can reproduce. At the same time, it means that you have entered the early stage of the Huashan realm. So, the heavenly soul is the sign that the cultivation has reached the Huashan realm?" Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and looked like he was drooling. "Isn't it said that the divine realm is the divine realm? There are geniuses and gods. It can also be said that your cultivation has entered a new world and supported your own sky. That's why it is called the Huashan realm." Nongju looked at his greedy face and said with a smile, "When you break through the Huashan realm and look back, you will find that there is a huge difference between the final stage of the crossing calamity stage and the early stage of the Huashan realm." Of course. Otherwise, why is it called the Huashan realm? Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, but I am still far from the Huashan realm. I don't know if there is any hope. If you continue to make trouble in the cultivation world, it is not impossible for you to survive. Nongzhu joked, with the speed of your cultivation, you have saved a lot of time compared to others. If you can break through the final stage of the crossing calamity stage before you are 100 years old, you will have hundreds of years to slowly struggle. I believe that even a pig can climb to the Huashan realm in a few hundred years. Of course, the premise is that you will not be killed in these hundreds of years. But according to your situation, it will be difficult for you to live until you are 100 years old. Nongzhu did not forget to add. Yu Qianqiu wanted to scold her on the spot, but when he thought that he still had questions to ask her, he could only shut up and curse in his heart. Damn it! Do you think I am like you? Without Ziyi, I have no worries and can go wherever I want. I have so many people I love, how can I just leave them alone? It is easy for me to plan for myself. It is not a problem for me to cultivate in seclusion every day. But how can I watch my loved ones die of old age? I want to enjoy immortal happiness together with everyone when I become immortal. Forget it, there is no way to talk to you, a person who eats and waits for death. Isn't there a middle and late stage in the Huashan realm? Will the rest of the souls come out one by one in these 3 stages? Yu Qianqiu asked. Something like that. Nongzhu nodded slightly and said, if there is heaven, there will be earth. Once the heaven soul comes out, the earth soul will be separated from the life soul, and then the first soul will be Tianqiu. When the heaven soul, the earth soul, and the first soul are gathered, it will be the peak of the early stage of the Huashan realm. When the second soul is gathered, the third soul is the spirit, and the fourth soul is the peak of the middle stage of the Huashan realm. When the fifth soul is gathered, the sixth soul is the essence, and the seventh soul is the peak of the late stage of the Huashan realm. The life soul will guard the body and not be confused with the others. The Huashan realm. It's really unfathomable, 2F** king unfathomable. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and said, now that you can see the 3 souls and 4 souls, you have reached the peak of the middle stage of the Huashan realm. That's nothing. Nongzhu said disapprovingly, you are far worse than your master. Your master has 3 souls and 7 souls. I'm afraid he has reached the stage of fusing souls. Fusing souls? Yu Qianqiu licked his lips and said, what's that? A stage higher than the Huashan realm, ascending to the immortal world. Nongzhu pointed to the sky, shook her head and sighed. When the cultivation of 3 souls and 7 souls is completed, starting from the 7 souls, they will be fused back to the life soul according to the order in which they were separated. Once the 7 souls are fused back to the life soul, he can ascend to the immortal world. Then every time a soul is fused back, his strength in the immortal world will be improved by 1 level, which is about the same as the Huashan realm. As for what exactly happened, no one is very clear about it. It's all just a legend. Damn. Becoming an immortal. Yu Qianqiu covered his chest excitedly, as if becoming an immortal was right in front of him. Nongzhu turned to look at him and sneered, why are you so excited? You don't even know when you will break through to the tribulation stage, and you are still dreaming about becoming an immortal. Isn't your dream too far away? This basin of cold water immediately poured on him, and he was immediately brought back to reality. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, I'm just dreaming about it. If I have a dream, I have a goal to strive for. I'll just work hard. It's good enough that you can reach your master's level. Nongzhu sighed, becoming an immortal? I don't know how those ancient cultivators did it. Yu Qianqiu sighed dejectedly, that's true. I don't know when my master can fuse the 7 souls. He swung on the swing weakly. I've also asked your master about this, but your master is very secretive and won't say a word about it. Nongzhu spread out her hands and said, I guess he felt that there was no hope for the fusion, or he wouldn't have gone to the East Holy Land to seek excitement. Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement and then swung on the swing again and said to himself, if the 3 souls and 7 spirits are fused again, I wonder what kind of realm his cultivation will reach? Nongzhu suddenly gave him a thumbs up and said without turning her head, congratulations. It is said that when you reach that level of cultivation besides the solid life soul, the other 2 souls and 7 spirits can transform into 3 heads and 6 arms outside the body to fight against the enemy together. That is the cultivation of an immortal emperor in the immortal world. You can pull him down and sit on his seat. If you are comfortable, don't forget to come down to the mortal world to help me. I will be very grateful. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, don't insult me. 3 heads and 6 arms? Is that Neza? Neza is the cultivation of an immortal emperor? He suddenly thought of the third prince Neza in the myth of his previous life and was stunned. Who is Neza? Can he have 3 heads and 6 arms? Nongju sneered and said, "Don't tell me you know an immortal emperor." "Of course not. I'm just imagining." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled. "You're really imaginative. Then what else are you thinking about?" Nongju asked casually. But Yu Qianqiu also answered casually, "I'm thinking, what is the cultivation of an immortal emperor? Yes, there is a saying about it. It's said that it's a god." Nongju waved her hand and pointed to the sun in the west and said, "It's said that after the 3 souls and 7 spirits are fused again, they can be divided again. But at that time, the 3 souls and 7 spirits will be released to cultivate instead of staying inside the body. Each soul can become a sun. There is an old legend. It seems that a god's cultivation has reached the realm where he can release all 3 souls and 7 spirits. As a result, 10 suns appeared in the sky and there was no night in the world, only day. The common people in the mortal world couldn't stand it. At this time a god called Yi suddenly appeared. He pulled his magic bow and shot down 9 suns. So there was only 1 sun left in the sky. Yu Qianqiu stood rooted to the spot. Chapter 484. Ho-Yi shoots the sun. It's actually Ho-Yi shoots the sun. It's actually Ho-Yi shoots the sun. Yu Qianqiu kept murmuring to himself and he seemed to be in a trance. He didn't read many books in his previous life, but he was very familiar with the story of Ho-Yi shooting the sun, which was known to every household. Normally he wouldn't even think of this kind of fairy tale, but now he heard someone say that Ho-Yi shot the sun in another world. What was the connection between these 2 stories? He already had an illusion and he couldn't tell whether he was in his previous life or this life. Nongju said without turning her head, "It's a great god named Yi who shoots the sun, but I don't know whether his name is Ho-Yi or not. You won't tell me that you know Yi Shen who shoots the sun, will you?" Yu Qianqiu didn't hear what she said at all and was still murmuring, "It's actually Ho-Yi who shoots the sun." Nongju suddenly turned around and was a little surprised to see him like this. Listening closely, she realized that he was repeating the same sentence over and over again. Nongju slightly narrowed her eyes and no one knew what she was thinking. Her slender fingers tapped on the armrest of the rattan chair, and she didn't disturb him, but quietly waited for him to come back to his senses. However, as he waited, the moon was high up in the sky and the night sky was full of stars. Suddenly, a shrill quacking sound of an old turtle flew across the sky. Yu Qianqiu trembled and came back to his senses. He subconsciously raised his head and glanced at the old turtle that flew across the bright moon. His eyes fell on the beautiful moon and he couldn't move any more. Suddenly the 2 words Chang'e came out of his mouth. Then he shouted again and reached out his hand to grab Nongju, who was sitting on the rattan chair. He directly grabbed Nongju's clothes on her chest, lifted her up and asked excitedly, "Does that great god Ho-Yi have a wife named Chang'e?" Nongju was a little confused. She was caught by him just like that and was tormented by him like crazy. She directly burst out a curse, F***CKU. "What do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Slowly he began to recover. Nongju immediately cursed, "Bastard, if you don't let me go, I'll teach you how to hold chopsticks with your feet. Then you'll know what I mean." Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses and was shocked. He quickly let go and looked around, only to realize that it was already dark. Immediately he said in surprise, "Why is it suddenly dark?" "Bastard, you're thinking about someone else's wife. The moment you think about it, you think about the sky turning dark. You still have the nerve to ask me?" Nongju said angrily, "Damn it! How dare you touch me? I haven't suffered such a loss for 1,000 years. If it weren't for that Rui pill, I would have let you know why the sky is so dark today." Yu Qianqiu's brain was still a little numb. He only heard the first part but not the second part. With a puzzled look he asked, "I want someone else's wife? No. I've never wanted to be someone else's wife." Nongju opened her mouth. Today was her bad luck. She didn't want to argue with him anymore. She said weakly, "You said that the wife of the great god Yi is called Chang Huang. God knows what kind of crazy you are." "Ho-Yi's wife? Are you always hungry?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment, then he shouted excitedly, "That's right, no wrong. F***CK, why is it so hard to talk to you? Ho-Yi's wife is called Chang'e, Chang'e as in 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 Chang'e. Do you understand?" He said it effortlessly, but Nongju had a hard time listening to him. Her eyes were a little numb and she was almost confused by him again. Who cares what he says? I'll scold him first. "Bastard, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? Are you even speaking human language?" Yu Qianqiu didn't mind. He asked excitedly, "Who cares what he's saying? As long as you can understand him, it's fine. Have you heard of Chang'e?" "I'll be damned if I can understand." Nongzhu was speechless again. She rubbed her face and answered seriously, "Who is Chang'e?" "Hou Yi's wife, of course." Yu Qianqiu's eyes sparkled. Nongzhu rolled her eyes and shouted, "Hou Yi's wife has nothing to do with me. Didn't you say that God Yi's wife is called Chang Huang? Let me correct you. She should be called Chang'e. Since you can say it, you must have heard of it. Tell me quickly." Yu Qianqiu said eagerly. The feeling of living two lives was not good. Suddenly he found the traces of two worlds crossing at a certain point. That feeling. He felt a little excited, as if he had met an old friend in a foreign land. "What the F***, CK?" Nongzhu couldn't help but burst out again. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu's chest and said, "There's something wrong with your brain. It was you who told me that God Yi's wife is called Chang Huang. How come it's me who said it?" "Hey, don't go back on your words. Both my ears clearly heard you say it." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and immediately patted his chest and said, "As long as you tell me what you know about Chang Huang, I'll give you a 7 orifices exquisite pill. I won't go back on my word." Nongzhu was stunned. She thought, is there something wrong with this guy's brain? Whatever, I'll get the pill first. If there's really a problem, I'll ask Bai Changchun to cure it. She rolled her eyes and nodded, "Yes. God Yi's wife is called Chang Huang. I said it. Give me the pill." Then she stretched out her hand. "What's the hurry?" Yu Qianqiu was so happy that he asked without thinking, "Tell me how you know Chang Huang first." "Bullshit. If I had the ability to know God Yi's wife, I wouldn't be standing here talking nonsense with you," Nongzhu said with a serious look. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "There's something wrong with your brain, isn't there?" "I'm being too hasty." Yu Qianqiu said very sincerely, "I mean, I want you to tell me what the legend is about God Yi and his wife, Chang Huang." Nongzhu pinched her chin and thought, a god who can shoot the sun, what kind of legend could he have with his wife? Fearing that he couldn't remember, Yu Qianqiu pointed to the bright moon and reminded, "The legend of Chang Huang and the moon, there is a palace on the moon, what's its name again?" Nongzhu wanted to make up a legend to fool him with a pill first. Being reminded by him, she was suddenly confused. After a pause, she said hesitantly, "The Moon Palace?" Wrong. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and reminded again, "There are 3 words in total. The first word is Guang, with the word, Guang. Think again. With the word, Guang?" Nongzhu, who was in the middle stage of Huashan realm, was now full of question marks. She looked at the moon with a dumbfounded expression, and then tried to answer in a weak voice, "Guangyu Palace? Guangming Palace? Guangyu Palace? Guangyuan Palace." Hearing a lot of palaces, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and denied them one by one. Nongzhu was tormented until her mouth was dry. Finally she couldn't help shouting, "You know what palace it is, why did you ask me? What palace is it?" "Guanghan Palace." After Yu Qianqiu announced the correct answer, he asked again, "Chang Huang raised a small animal and planted a tree outside the Guanghan Palace. What kind of animal did she raise? What kind of tree did she plant?" Nongzhu opened her mouth and then her face twitched. She pointed at him with her trembling body and said harshly, "You brat, how dare you fool me? Go to hell." Nongzhu suddenly came to a realization. Her intuition told her that this brat was usually so cunning, how could he ask such a stupid question? It was obvious that he was teasing her with the elixir, but she was like a dog seeing a bone, so she moved forward eagerly. Bang! He kicked out. Yu Qianqiu let out a scream, and he flew to the flowers 5 or 6 meters away. "Shit! This flower has thorns." Yu Qianqiu's scream immediately came from the flowers. "Nongzhu, are you crazy? Is there something wrong with your brain? Is there something wrong with my brain?" Nongzhu pointed at her nose and then pointed at the person who climbed up from the flowers and said, "If I continue to talk to you, no problem will become a problem. Bastard. How dare you fool me? You don't want to live, do you? Damn you, there are so many thorns, my ass." A figure jumped out from the flowers. Under the moonlight, Yu Qianqiu tiptoed as he scolded, "Nongzhu, just you wait. One day I'll throw you into a pile of thorns and enjoy you to your heart's content." "Stubborn. I will let you enjoy it now." Nongzhu snorted coldly and teleported to his back. She kicked him in the buttocks as fast as a sudden clap of thunder. "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu screamed again and he was kicked into the air. He crashed through the door and rolled into the room. Inside, there was a sound of tables and chairs being overturned. Inside the room, Zhang Peng and Farong, who had long been in tears, hurried over to help him up. Yu Qianqiu bared his teeth and pointed at Nongzhu. Originally, he wanted to curse out loud, but when he thought that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him, he forced the words out of his mouth. "You're ruthless." "We'll see." Zhang Peng closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, Yu Qianqiu ran to the bedroom and took off all his clothes. He ran to the bright part of the room naked and stood in a straight line. He said, "Farong, come and help me remove the thorns. The old man is so cruel. He sealed my dantian and deliberately made me suffer." When Nongzhu kicked him, she had already sealed his dantian with her hidden strength. Otherwise, with his cultivation of the original infant stage, the thorns could not hurt him. It took him a while to remove all the thorns. This injury was not a problem. He was not so weak. The key was that Nongzhu had secretly sealed his dantian. Farong and Zhang Peng could not remove it at all. For a cultivator, his dantian would be in danger at any time if his dantian was sealed. It seemed that he had to ask Nongzhu to be merciful. "Zhang Peng, go and have a rest. I am fine." After sending Zhang Peng away, he comforted Farong and told her not to worry. Yu Qianqiu walked to the swing outside slowly. He looked at Nongzhu, who was lying on the rattan chair and staring at him with a sneer. He coughed awkwardly and shook the rope. He looked up and sighed, "The moon is nice today." "It is nice. Do you want me to send you to the Moon Palace to see Chang Huang?" Nongzhu sneered. Chapter 485. He finally realized that when this guy needed help, he would pretend to be a coward. When he tore off his gown and scratched the rattan chair, it was so touching. Once he stopped asking for help, he could turn around and pretend to be his father. He turned hostile faster than anyone else. Now he came to show off again. It would be strange if he could be nice to him. "Well, you know I'm in a dangerous situation now. You sealed my dantian. If someone comes to kill me now, I can't protect myself. You think?" Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically. "You want me to remove the inhibition formation in your dantian?" Nongzhu shook her head and said, "No way. Don't." Yu Qianqiu pulled the rope and said, "If something happens to me, you can't explain it to my master." "What a joke. If you're killed by others, it's because you're not as good as them. What do you think I need to explain to your master?" Nongzhu sneered and said, "If I kill you with my own hands, it's a bit unreasonable. But I'm happy to see you killed by others." Yu Qianqiu didn't believe what she said. If she really wanted to see him die, she didn't have to protect him at the risk of falling out with Hua Zongming and the others. She was just saying it out of anger. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, 17 orifices exquisite pill, can you remove it?" "Bastard, I've been waiting for you to say this." Nongzhu laughed and climbed up from the rattan chair. She walked to Yu Qianqiu and stretched out 2 fingers, saying, "One is not enough. Z and I will take 2. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "You're too greedy. There are only 9 pills in one furnace. You want 2? Black or white? If you don't give me 2, I guess you won't dare to leave this door for the rest of your life. It's up to you." Nongzhu pretended to be calm. Then she patted her forehead and said, "I forgot to tell you that sealing your dantian is my exclusive skill. Even if your master were here, he would have to spend a lot of effort to do it. Don't dispel it recklessly. Don't blame me if you destroy your dantian by force." Yu Qianqiu pointed at him and said bitterly, "To think that I trusted you so much. Otherwise, how could I have given you the chance to seal my dantian? Alright, I guess I'm unlucky. 2 it is. I agree." "Ah." Nongzhu laughed and said, "Why didn't you say yes earlier? Why did you have to talk so much nonsense?" As she said this, she pinched out a messy finger incantation and slapped it into Yu Qianqiu's abdomen with several white lights. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief as the Zhen Yuan in his body began to circulate once more. The feeling of having one's fate controlled by someone else was too terrifying, even more terrifying than death itself. It was the feeling that he wanted to get rid of the most in his life, and that was why he had fought so hard to get rid of the shackles that bound him. Nongzhu stretched out her hand and said, "Am I good enough? Work first, then take the items. Now give me the spirit pills. Do you think I'll give it to you just because you said so?" Yu Qianqiu snorted inwardly and shrugged his shoulders. "We'll talk about it later. Anyway, you're not in a hurry to use them." "What do you mean?" Nongzhu's face darkened. "How dare you fool me? If I can seal you once, I can seal you again. It's useless even if you're unhappy. I don't have the spirit pills with me. Even if you seal me 10 times, I won't be able to give them to you." Yu Qianqiu said helplessly, "If I carry such a precious thing with me and the news spreads, it will attract covetous eyes from others. Wouldn't I be seeking death then? You'd better not lie to me or I'll make you cry. Nongju squinted her eyes and said, Where are the spirit pills? Tell me and I'll go and get them myself. That's fine. However, I have to make it clear. You can only take 2. You cannot touch the rest, Yu Qianqiu said seriously. Once you know where it is, it's not up to you to decide. Just wait and beg me. Nongju's face softened a little. She said, Don't worry. I'm a man of my word. I'll only take what belongs to me. I won't touch other people's things. Damn. Those who say they're trustworthy are usually the most untrustworthy. I'm 100% sure of this. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and nodded. Last time when I went to the Moon Clan with Zi, Qianghua Fairy wanted to introduce us to the Cultivation Alliance. I was worried that I would offend too many people and it would not be safe to bring the spirit pills to the Cultivation Alliance. So, I left the spirit pills with Qianghua Fairy. Hearing this, Nongju's face turned green. Her instinct told her that this guy was playing with her again. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that the spirit pills were in Qianghua Fairy's hands? Yu Qianqiu continued as if nothing had happened. Of course, Qianghua Fairy doesn't know it's a spirit pill. You'd better not tell her when you go to get it. The fewer people who know about it, the better. By the way, the spirit pills are sealed with hell iron. It can block spiritual consciousness from seeing them. You need to use the secret code when you go to get it. Otherwise, Qianghua Fairy won't give it to you. There was a secret code? Nongju was a little surprised. She kind of believed him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. She asked suspiciously, What secret code? Yu Qianqiu explained, When you find her, you tell her to take the thing that Yu Qianqiu left with you. She will say, The Heavenly King covers the Earth Tiger. And you will say, The pagoda suppresses the river monster. Then she will give it to you. Nongju's face twitched. She said in a low voice, Why did you leave it with her? Because of you. Yu Qianqiu said in surprise. You are talking nonsense again. It has nothing to do with me. Nongju stared at him. There are 3 reasons. Yu Qianqiu counted on his fingers and said, First, you didn't see how intimate Fairy Jasper was when she saw Z. I saw that the 2 of them looked so similar, so I felt that the 2 of them must be related. After that, I heard some clues from her words. Z should be the daughter she had with you. Don't be anxious. Let me finish. Nongju's face was gloomy. She put down her raised hand. Yu Qianqiu coughed and continued, I am Z's friend. She won't say anything if I leave this thing with her. Second, the elixir is sealed by hell iron. My divine sense can't see what's inside. Thirdly, I believe that you, Mr. Nongju, have good taste as well. Those who are able to get into bed with you and give birth to children must be of good moral character. Enough. Nongju turned sideways and said in a low voice, You can get it by yourself later. Just remember that you owe me 2 elixirs. Don't try to renege. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, Don't worry. I live by my credit. You don't have to worry. Don't talk to me about your bullshit credit. Nongju shouted, Go back to your woman. You like to play? I will play with you anytime. Yu Qianqiu was very happy. He cupped his hands and turned around to leave. But after a few steps, he frowned again. He came back and asked, Senior Nongju, there is something I really want to know. I sincerely want to know. Nongju stared at the night sky in the distance. No one knew what she was thinking. She answered calmly, Say it. About the legend about Ishin shooting the sun, how much do you know? Can you tell me everything you know? Yu Qianqiu took a breath and said. For this legend, he suddenly had an indescribable expectation. He didn't know what he was expecting. It was vague and vague. Nongju turned around and said with her eyes shining, You seem to be very interested in this. What? Worship. I am fascinated by the worship of a powerful man. That was all he could say. No one would understand what happened in his previous life, and there was no need for him to say it. I have only heard about this from the former torture master of the demon ghost region. He said that there was a great god named Yi who destroyed the 9 suns in the sky with 9 arrows in a row to save the world. I have been fascinated and asked him about it, but he only said that it was an old legend and shouldn't be taken seriously. That's all I know. As for the wife of Ishin you mentioned, I have never even heard of her, not to mention the palace, raising animals or planting trees. Nongju paused and said, If you want to know more you can ask your teacher. As the current torture master he may know more than me. I see. Yu Qianqiu let out a breath, nodded with disappointment and said, I won't bother you any more. He turned around and left slowly. However, when he walked to the door, Nongju called him again, Come back, I almost forgot to tell you one thing. Yu Qianzhou's eyes shone. He hurriedly ran back and asked, Elder Nongzhu, do you remember any legend about Yixin? Don't mention Yixin to me again. I've told you everything I know. Nongzhu looked at him with puzzlement for a long while, as if there was something she couldn't figure out. Then she said, You're too noisy. If you hadn't mentioned Shuntian Island and your master just now, I would have forgotten about it. When I left Shuntian Island, your teacher suddenly sent me a message and asked me to ask some questions for him. I will tell you everything I know. Yu Qianzhou immediately folded his hands and stood up respectfully. Nongzhu nodded and said, Your teacher said that because of your low cultivation he was still worried about letting you travel alone. He asked me to ask you, which one do you think is more powerful, the fire magic or the water magic? Well. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and said, I have fought with people many times and found that the water magic is almost useless when I meet masters. Instead, the fire magic always helps me win. So, the fire magic should be more powerful. Your master said that if you say that the power of fire and water arts is as great, then there's no need to say anything else. You won't be too worried about your ability to protect yourself when you travel around the various countries. Nongzhu sorted out her thoughts and continued, If you say the fire magic is more powerful than the water magic, he asked me to tell you something else. I will listen to your advice, teacher. Yu Qianzhou was a little excited. Although his teacher didn't talk much, once he opened his mouth, every word was like a gem, absolutely without any nonsense. Listen carefully to your teacher's original words. Nongzhu said, Water and fire are two extremes. The operation of the way of heaven is about balance. Where there is yin there must be yang. Therefore there is no such thing as fire being more powerful than water. If you think fire is more powerful than water, then you are totally wrong. The reason why you think so is that you haven't understood the mystery in it or you haven't used it well. As I said, if you use it well you will be invincible. The key of the fire magic is to release fire and defend the enemy with yang. The water magic is yin and yang are opposite to each other. When fire is released, water is withdrawn. Only by releasing and withdrawing can you follow the way of heaven. Yes, that's what your teacher said. Nongzhu poked her head over and asked softly, What is your teacher talking about? I am confused. Do you know what it means? Tell me. When the fire is released, the water comes in. Yu Qianzhou murmured to himself with a dull expression. He didn't reply to Nongzhu and walked to the side of the flower bed alone. He raised his palm towards the flowers under the moonlight. I asked you a question. Nongzhu's voice stopped abruptly, and her eyes gradually widened. She saw the seedlings and flowers in the flower bed were rapidly withering. Chapter 486. There were a total of 3 flower beds in the yard, distributed on both sides and in the middle. Yu Qianzhou was facing the middle one. This flower bed was the largest, occupying nearly half of the yard, and there was a big tree in the middle. The flowers were delicate under the moonlight, and the green leaves were glowing faintly. However, all of this changed after Yu Qianzhou attacked with his palm. The color of life faded instantly. The flowers and green leaves withered and shrunk as if they were facing the cold winter. The big tree made a muffled sound and the withered leaves fell. Nongzhu had never seen such a phenomenon, and his face was full of disbelief. The leaves of the big tree fluttered, and the sound of rustling was endless. It did not take long for all the leaves to fall. The big tree had withered, and it showed its loftiness under the moonlight. Nongzhu turned his head slowly and looked at the young man beside him in horror. Yu Qianzhou looked calm and his palm was still in the air. He looked extremely serene under the moonlight, as if he was a god who controlled life, and grasped the growth rings of time with a snap of his fingers. If I want you to wither, how can you let flowers bloom, and how can you be lush and green? Nongzhu believed that with his cultivation, it was not a problem to turn the whole flower bed into powder in an instant. However, it was impossible for him to make the flowers and trees in the nursery grow rapidly across time and space without any effort. This was already a miracle. Nongzhu thought so. Only Yu Qianzhou himself knew that this had absolutely nothing to do with a miracle. It was just that his master's words reminded him. The power of the fire formula was to burn, and it was impossible for the water formula to submerge the enemy with water. Even if the water was turned into ice, the ice would be disintegrated in an instant, and it would be difficult to give the enemy a fatal blow. At that time he was thinking, stop? How can the water formula resist the enemy? His eyes fell on the flowers and trees, and he suddenly realized some common sense from his previous life. The bodies of animals and plants contained a lot of water. Without the support of water, it meant that they lost their lives. Since he could absorb the water elements from lakes and rivers, why couldn't he absorb the water elements from animals and plants? Thus, he activated the water incantation and enveloped the entire flower bed. Sure enough, as he had hoped, the thousands of flowers and trees did not have the slightest resistance, and were instantly sucked dry by his palm, turning into water elements and stored in his body. The flowers and trees in the flower bed also lost all signs of life in an instant. What a domineering spell. Yu Qianqiu looked calm on the surface, but he was deeply shocked by himself. He had used the water incantation many times. Other than feeling that it was miraculous, he really didn't feel that it was very powerful. He didn't expect that after changing the way he used it, it would actually be so overbearing. It was unbelievably overbearing. Yu Qianqiu now truly understood by Changchun's words, use it well and you will be invincible. At the same time he couldn't help but admire Bai Changchun. He had never practiced water arts before, but based on his own understanding of the heavenly Tao, he was able to speculate how to use water arts to unleash their power. The #1 expert in the world was indeed not someone to be trifled with. Just his ability to see through everything in the world was not something an ordinary person could compare with. Yu Qianqiu was sincerely convinced and a little touched. From Nongzhu's words he could tell that Bai Changchun's eyes were like torches. Obviously he had already guessed the mystery of the water incantation, but he had never told him personally. According to his style of doing things, he guessed that he wanted him to comprehend it. But because he was worried that he would encounter danger when he traveled among the countries, he used Nongzhu's words to enlighten him and help him. It was completely to let him have more skills to defend himself. Nongzhu casually picked up a withered flower branch and pinched it in her hand. Immediately it turned into powder. It was indeed dead without any signs of life. Nongzhu was dumbfounded. Boy, how did you do that just now? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu sobered up and sighed slowly. He bowed piously to the direction of Shentian Island and said, "Thank you, Master, for pointing out the right path and enlightening me." Then he bowed to Nongzhu and said, "Thank you, Master, for passing on the message." Nongzhu threw away the thing in her hand and patted the dust on her palm. She grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm and asked curiously, "You mean, everything that happened just now was because of the few words I passed on to old Bai? There is such a big mystery hidden in these few words?" "Yes." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said with a smile, "To me these few words are like a golden bell. It is thought-provoking and has solved the puzzle that I have been puzzled for a long time." Nongzhu witnessed everything in front of her. She really could not imagine that just because of a few words, a Yuaning stage cultivator could immediately become so powerful. This pair of master and disciple was too amazing. She immediately muttered the words that Bai Changchun wanted her to pass on to old Bai. Then she asked suspiciously, "These few words are so powerful? Why didn't I hear it? Everyone can hear it. Then why would my master pass it on to me through your mouth?" Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I just learned a set of magic arts from my master's words. I don't know how powerful it is. Do you want to have a try? Let me have a try?" Nongzhu subconsciously looked at the withered flower bed and said suspiciously, "Are you going to try it on me?" Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly and said, "I just learned it so I don't know how powerful it is. Senior, you have a high cultivation level. I want to try it on you so that you can evaluate the power of my magic arts." Nongzhu glanced at the withered flower bed again and thought that this magic art was a bit strange. Thinking that if she also became an old man in an instant, it would be very interesting. This thing could not become young again, right? She was shocked and coughed twice and said, "There is a big gap between our cultivation levels. It is useless to try it on me. You'd better find someone who has a similar cultivation level as you to try it." After saying that, she turned around and left. She didn't want to say anything more. Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Don't go. I'm afraid that my magic art is too powerful. If I try it on someone else they will die. You have a high cultivation level so it should be no problem." Hearing this, Nongzhu quickened her pace. She scolded in her heart, "Bastard, I know it is too powerful, but I still let you try it unless there is something wrong with my head. Could it be that you are scared?" Yu Qianqiu shouted. Nongzhu, who walked to the swing, stopped and turned back with a sneer. "Are you kidding me? How can I be afraid of you, who is only in the Yuaning realm?" She added in her heart, "I'm afraid that your magic art is too strange. There is no need to take risks for something that I don't know the details of, and that is not good for me." Yu Qianqiu came over and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't delay you. I just want to try it casually. I want you to help me evaluate how useful it will be if I fight against an enemy." Nongzhu said coldly, "Go away, don't come near me, I want to rest. If you keep talking, don't blame me for sealing your dantian again. I won't release it for you no matter what. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, but he did not force her. He walked into the house ready to find someone else to try it. He probably did not know that Nongzhu cherished her appearance the most. Otherwise, she would not look like a middle-aged man at this age. She really spent a lot of cultivation to maintain it. In fact, Nongzhu was not afraid of the power of the magic art, but she was afraid that the magic art was too strange. It would turn her blue face into a white-haired old face, which was more painful than killing her. Therefore she simply chose to avoid it. She really did not dare to take the risk. He had wandered around the world and understood that there were many strange and mysterious things that could not be determined by the level of cultivation. The Prime Minister of Dayang Kingdom, Yin Wufeng, returned. Many people in the court sighed. Why did he come back? Those bandits who killed and robbed people were all good-for-nothings. Weren't they bloodthirsty? He did not cause any trouble, so why did he come back? In the eyes of others, Yin Wufeng's matter was a result that could be seen and guessed. People like the Emperor of Dayang Kingdom and those in the cultivation world were the ones who knew the truth. Of course, no one would announce such a thing to ordinary people. The matter gradually calmed down and Dayang Kingdom returned to normal. The martial arts competition for the Emperor's son-in-law that was postponed due to the attack on the Prime Minister's residence was once again organized in full swing. After all, it was not good to let the distinguished guests from various countries wait any longer. The entire Dayang city returned to its original liveliness. It was indeed lively, but it had to be lively. Yu Qianqiu's bold statement that he was the strongest in the world below the spirit-severing stage had already caused a huge uproar in various countries. There was a person called by Changchun who was the strongest in the world. It could not be helped. Even those spirit-severing experts had admitted it, so naturally, no one dared to have any objections. Now, a Yu Qianqiu had suddenly appeared and boasted shamelessly. Furthermore, he was a cultivator from Wuxia. Most importantly, this person was only at the nascent soul stage. Although it was said that this person had a glorious battle record in Wuxia's cultivation world, it did not mean that there was no one in the cultivation world who could make him talk nonsense. This could not be tolerated. Therefore, a large number of cultivators gathered in Dayang City to teach this fellow a lesson. Naturally, there were also people who wanted to watch the show. It just so happened that the Dayang Kingdom was going to have a martial arts competition for the Emperor's son-in-law. Coupled with the fact that a group of cultivators had come to participate in this grand event, it would be strange if Dayang City was not lively. Of course, those who came were basically cultivators below the spirit-severing stage. It should be known that Yu Qianqiu had made such a big name for himself. If anyone could kill Yu Qianqiu, their reputation would naturally rise along with it. When people talked about it, they would definitely say that so-and-so killed Yu Qianqiu. Many people usually could not find an opportunity to stand out. Now that they could kill Yu Qianqiu, who was at the nascent soul stage, it should not be a problem, right? Therefore, outside the Baiwan Kingdom's embassy, many people dressed in strange clothes appeared every day. These people were naturally cultivators from various countries. However, they all knew that there were Mr. Nongzhu, who was at the middle stage of the spirit-severing stage, and Wen Rui, who was at the early stage of the spirit-severing stage. With two spirit-severing stage cultivators in charge, although they knew that Yu Qianqiu was inside, they did not have the guts to barge in. Yu Qianqiu, who was inside the embassy, did not know what the situation was like outside, but he could guess that there were many cultivators outside who were eyeing him covetously. If he heard someone say something like that, even if he did not do anything, he would come to watch the show and see how that person died. Sigh. That damned Hua Zongming, I will not forgive you. Yu Qianqiu sat on the steps in front of the house and sighed endlessly. Actually, he was no longer interested in participating in that *T martial arts competition to recruit a son-in-law. Back then, because he was unfamiliar with the situation, he wanted to use the opportunity to get to know the cultivators from various countries and understand the situation. Ever since he received Lu Wanwan's Jade Archive and gained some understanding of the situation, he already had a plan in mind. He did not intend to stay in Dayang City to play around anymore. However, he should not have been too greedy and kidnapped Yin Wufeng to extort Yin Baikong. However, who knew that someone would spread the news to the whole world and even attracted Nongzhu over? That damned Nongzhu even lured Hua Zongming and the others over. His identity was accidentally exposed, and in order to get rid of the spirit-severing stage cultivators, he made a bold statement again. I reckon that the development of the situation is like a rolling snowball, getting bigger and bigger. I wonder how many cultivators have come to Dayang City now. Yu Qianqiu sat on the steps and muttered to himself. Looking at Nongzhu, who was swaying gently on the swing, he gnashed his teeth in hatred. He wanted nothing more than to go over and carve the word bastard on that handsome face. Yu Qianqiu had asked Nongzhu to take Furong away, but that guy just had to be interested in the martial arts competition to recruit a son-in-law. He said that he had never seen it before and insisted on watching it before leaving. Didn't he know that the longer this dragged on, the more cultivators from various countries would come, and the more dangerous it would be for him? He had ulterior motives. After sending Furong back to Utopia, he had yet to think of a way to explain to Chu Pinger that he would not do something like causing a family conflict. It was too dangerous to bring Furong along with him, and the current situation was too dangerous. If he sent her back to Myriad Fragrance Garden after patting his chest in front of his father-in-law, how embarrassing would it be if he sent her back after just a few days? After thinking about it, he could only wait until Nongzhu took Furong away. When that time came, it would not be difficult for him to sneak out alone. He had already prepared a backup plan when he secretly dug a cave outside the city. If it really did not work, he could ask Boss Sang of the vast welcoming tavern to take a silver ball out of the city. Tomorrow was the day of the martial arts competition to recruit a son-in-law. In the majestic palace of Dayang City, flags were fluttering in the wind and security was tight. The venue for the martial arts competition was basically ready, waiting for the winner to take the crown and marry the princess. West Palace Courtyard, Liuxiang House, the widowed residence of the third princess of Dayang Kingdom, Zhao Qinxiang. Inside the Liuxiang house, a young woman in formal dress sat with her eyebrows furrowed. Her appearance was good, and she stared at the portrait hanging on the screen opposite her. Her eyes revealed a sense of stubbornness. On the portrait was a handsome and mighty general in armor, riding on a war horse and holding a spear. Beside the portrait was a note, Chu Xiong. This woman was the third princess of Dayang Kingdom, Zhao Qinxiang. There were no palace maids in her boudoir, only her two married sisters sitting on either side of her. The two sisters had received their father's order and specially came to stay with their sister for a few days. The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, and the second sister, Zhao Hanxiang, looked at each other. The former held Qinxiang's hand and sighed, "Third sister, why do you have to do this? Chu Xiong has been dead for many years. I think he would not want to see you like this in the underworld." "Yes, third sister." Zhao Hanxiang smiled bitterly, "Since you have already begged father to hold the martial arts competition to recruit a son-in-law, this portrait of Chu Xiong should not be left. If the future son-in-law sees it, how can he endure it? I'm afraid it will ruin your sister's lifelong happiness." Zhao Qinxiang did not say anything. Instead, she stood up and walked to the hanging portrait. She looked at it and said, "A good woman does not marry a second husband. Chu Xiong, after I take revenge for you, I will cut my throat and go to the underworld to find you to apologize." After saying this, she rolled up the portrait and stuffed it into the copper incense tripod beside her. Not long after, black smoke rose. The two elder sisters were stunned by her words and actions. Chapter 487. In the imperial study, Emperor Zhao Heng dismissed his two daughters expressionlessly after listening to their report. The two girls looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect their father to have no reaction at all. However, they did not dare to say anything. They had been married for a long time, and when they came back occasionally, they were actually trembling in fear when facing their father. Once they stepped out of the palace, it did not feel like a father and daughter meeting. Instead, it felt like the wife of an official meeting the emperor. The two girls bowed obediently and left. Zhao Heng picked up the memorial on the desk and opened it. Suddenly, he tilted his head slightly and asked, "Has Shi Wenguang's vanguard general Zhang Ping really been executed?" Beside him was a white-haired chief eunuch. He replied sternly, "It is difficult for the spies to break through Shi Wenguang's hidden sentries. Not many of them can return alive. However, it is true that Zhang Ping violated military discipline and was beheaded. I believe it is true. Shi Wenguang's army is very strict. He does not tolerate people who violate military discipline." Zhao Heng's expression was strange. He admired and hated Shi Wenguang. He admired him because he was a rare talent, but he hated him because such a general was not under his command but his enemy. Thinking of the 2 million-strong army occupying the western part of Wuxia, the 6 countries could not cross the border. If they made any moves, they would be attacked immediately. The gains did not make up for the losses. They had been at war for many years, even with the 6 countries working together to attack, but they still suffered under Shi Wenguang's hands. In a fit of anger, he mobilized millions of troops and divided the 6 countries. The 6 countries could not fight back. In the end, the 6 countries asked for peace with Wuxia. The rulers of the 6 countries were humiliated. One could imagine how depressed they were. The emperor of Wuxia is incompetent, but he has such a general under him. It is difficult for us to cross the line. We are going to lose our lives. Zhao Heng could not help but sigh. Master, don't worry. The old eunuch said softly, didn't the higher-ups tell us to bear with it for now? After the war between the cultivation world of various countries and the cultivation world of China was over, someone would naturally deal with Shi Wenguang secretly. From then on, the western part of Wuxia will no longer have such a brave general. The various countries will work together to divide the Wuxia Empire. From the fact that this old eunuch knew about the cultivation world, it was obvious that he was someone Zhao Heng trusted. It's a pity that he died. Talent was hard to come by. Unfortunately, I can't use it. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Zhao Heng stared at the old eunuch and said, since the third young lady is determined to die, don't let the third young lady know that Zhang Peng has died. Let her continue to choose her husband. Understood. The old eunuch nodded slightly. Zhao Heng began to focus on the memorials. As he corrected them, he said, this girl is so stubborn. She has been so devoted to a dead man for so many years. She begged me to hold a martial arts competition to find a prince consort for her. I thought she had thought it through, but I didn't expect her to actually want to find a capable prince consort to avenge the death of Chu Xiong. But that's fine too. I can use this opportunity to recruit talented generals and prepare for the future. Master is wise, the old eunuch said. Zhao Heng turned his head and glared at him. Keep an eye on them for me. Most of the royal relatives and nobles from other countries aren't doing well in their own countries. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to our country to be the emperor's son-in-law. Although they aren't doing well, the influence they have received since childhood is not something the children of ordinary families can compare with. Among them, there are many who are familiar with military strategies. There is only one daughter left and only one prince consort. As long as the rest are talented, try your best to win them over. Let them stay and work for me. I am willing to give them high positions and generous salaries. Don't worry, master. I will arrange it properly. The old eunuch nodded. Then there was silence in the imperial study. Today was the day of the martial arts competition to find a prince consort. The entire Dayang city was very lively. The common people couldn't enter the palace to watch the competition, so they had to go to the streets to watch the participants pass by. Normally, only the participants could enter the palace. The rest of the attendants were limited. But because of Nongzhu, Wenrui personally went to the palace to look for the Mi brothers. Of course, the Mi brothers wouldn't care about this. They immediately found a few tokens to enter the palace and gave them to Wenrui. As soon as they went out, they saw a crowd. Nongzhu, Yu Qianqiu, Farong, and Zhang Peng squeezed into a carriage and joined the long queue of people from various countries. The soldiers had cleared the streets, so the journey was smooth. Nongzhu looked outside with a smile. She hadn't seen such a lively expression for a long time. Furong's face was also full of curiosity. She looked around. The most depressed one was Zhang Peng. After all, among them, he was the only one who was forced by his master to participate in the martial arts competition. The others were just watching the fun, but he was the one being watched. He couldn't be happy even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu lifted the curtain and looked at the two sides of the street. He kept shaking his head as he looked. There were many cultivators in the crowd. He couldn't tell who had a higher cultivation level, but there were many cultivators who were lower than him. He guessed that they were just here to watch the fun. Since it was like this, he might as well face it calmly. He looked at those cultivators with a provocative look. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, I can't avoid it. Today, I'll show my face to the world of cultivators from various countries. Who's afraid of who? Yu Qianqiu looked outside with a smile. From time to time, he raised his middle finger at the cultivators in the crowd. They didn't know what it meant anyway. Boy, what do you mean by raising your middle finger? Nongzhu couldn't help but ask. Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh," and said disapprovingly, it's nothing. It's a custom of Dayang Kingdom. I'm greeting people on the street to show my respect. I've been here before. Why haven't I heard of it? Nongzhu murmured and turned around. Without saying a word, she pointed her middle finger out of the window and shook it vigorously. His fingers were slender, and his middle finger was raised elegantly. No wonder he was Mr. Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he put down his hand. He couldn't associate himself with that guy. After entering the imperial city, everyone got off their horses and alighted. The gate of the imperial city was guarded by a large number of soldiers. It was impossible for ordinary people to get close. Those miscellaneous cultivators couldn't break in either. They couldn't enter without a token to enter the palace. There were some rules that even cultivators couldn't break. The Mi brothers had transferred a large number of people from the same sect from Mount Guangguang to guard around the imperial city. This was to prevent cultivators from breaking in. The guests from various countries entered the imperial city in a single file. The first thing they did was to pay their respects to the emperor of Dayang Kingdom. Nongzhu, Wenrui, and the others naturally couldn't pay their respects to a secular emperor. Mi Russian was waiting in the imperial city. When he saw them, he immediately came to greet them and took them out for other arrangements. Only Zhang Peng was driven back by Yu Qianqiu and went through the process with the Wen family. Mi Russian carefully looked at Yu Qianqiu a few times, then led them to a sizable side hall. There were a few hundred chairs arranged in a circle. More than 10 people had already arrived. They were sitting peacefully and chatting with each other. They were probably cultivators sent by various countries to protect the royal family. Mi Russian came in and cupped his hands. Everyone, Mr. Nongzhu and Mr. Wenrui are here. The group of people hurriedly stood up and saluted. Nongzhu raised his middle finger and said, "Do as you please. Don't be polite. I'm here to watch the fun." The group of people returned to their seats with doubts. They didn't know what Nongzhu meant by raising his middle finger, but judging from his expression, it should be a greeting. Everyone's eyes then fell on Yu Qianqiu and sized him up. Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable being stared at. He found that there were a few early-stage nascent soul cultivators, a few middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, and a few others whose cultivation he couldn't see. Then people came in one after another. The first thing they did was to greet Nongzhu and Wenrui. Nongzhu casually raised his middle finger, which stunned the people who greeted him. The second thing they did was to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was beside Nongzhu. After being stared at for a long time, Yu Qianqiu was a little numb. He simply entertained himself with Furong and pretended not to see anything. After waiting for a while, it was estimated that almost all the people had arrived. Hundreds of chairs were almost full. Between every 2 chairs, there was a small tea table with tea and snacks on it. There were more than a dozen disciples in the foundation building realm who kept shuttling back and forth, pouring tea and water for them. They were probably brought from the Guangzhou Peak. The atmosphere in the hall was a little quiet. Because of the presence of Nongzhu and Wenrui, the 2 cultivators in the Huashan realm, everyone was a little nervous. However, there were some bold ones who couldn't stand it anymore. They coughed, stood up and saluted Nongzhu and said loudly, "Mr. Nongzhu, may I ask if the person sitting next to you is Yu Qianqiu?" Hundreds of bright eyes all stared at them. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile and nodded. "Yes, he is Yu Qianqiu. What can I do for you?" His tone seemed to be reminding something or wanting to see something interesting. Yu Qianqiu immediately looked at that person. He was squarish, tall and strong. From his appearance, he indeed had the talent to stand out. "Silly bird. I am Ding Wei, a cultivator in the late nascent soul stage. I heard that Yu Qianqiu claimed to be the best cultivator in the world below the Huashan realm. Is that true?" Ding Wei asked respectfully. Yes, I heard it with my own ears." Nongzhu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "I can prove that he did say that." Not only did Yu Qianqiu feel uncomfortable hearing this, even when Rui looked at Nongzhu with some surprise. Back at Bai Wan's embassy, he risked everything to protect Yu Qianqiu. How could he be suspected of selling him out now? Nongzhu continued to chat with Ding Wei with a teasing tone. The topic was getting more and more sensitive. Only their hearty voices could be heard in the hall. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked around. Everyone was staring at him. Coupled with Nongzhu's ambiguous attitude, it would be hard for him to have a good time today. He sat next to Wenrui and rubbed his nose with his palm. He tilted his head and asked softly, "Senior Wenrui, apart from the 2 of you, are there any other cultivators in the Huashan realm? What are their cultivations like?" Wenrui was stunned. He looked at Ding Wei and scanned everyone present. Then he replied telepathically, "Apart from me and Mr. Nongzhu, there are no cultivators in the Huashan realm. There are 9 in the early stage of the tribulation passing. The rest are all below the tribulation passing stage. What do you want?" "That's good to hear." Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. Under Wenrui's surprised gaze, he coughed and stood up. Chapter 488. Nongzhu and him were separated by Wenrui. They sat in the middle, followed by Nongzhu, Wenrui, Yu Qianqiu, Furong and Wenbai. Even though he spoke softly, Nongzhu could not hear him. In fact, many people heard him. "Everyone says this kid is good at stirring up trouble. Before I leave, I want to see how he does it." Nongzhu glanced at him with a smile, leaned back and did not speak. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and said, "Ding Wei? Brother Ding? Have we met before?" "No, this is my first time." Ding Wei also cupped his fists. "I see that Brother Ding keeps mentioning my name. Is there something you want to talk to me about?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. Ding Wei snorted, "I'm not the only one looking for you. Based on what you said, cultivators from every country want to find you. Let's see if you have the ability to call yourself the number one cultivator below the soul-forming stage." He then looked around and shouted, "Everyone, am I right?" "That's right. You're a mere nascent soul cultivator, how dare you call yourself number one?" With someone taking the lead and Yu Qianqiu standing up as well, the group of people immediately began to sway from their seats and jeered. Some even stood up and pointed their fingers at him as they berated him. Farong immediately became nervous. She had never seen such a scene before. Yu Qianqiu stuck his pinky into his ear and blew on it. Then he slowly looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "Don't get too excited, everyone. I was just joking. I didn't even take it seriously, but you all took it seriously. It's unbelievable." The crowd suddenly became quiet. Nongzhu laughed dryly, but she forced herself not to make a sound. No wonder he was a soul-forming stage cultivator. Ding Wei, who stood up, was stunned for a while. Suddenly, his expression changed and he said angrily, "Joking? How dare you joke about the reputation of the cultivators in the world? What do you think the cultivators in the world are? Brother Ding, don't you think you're putting too much on us? It's not as serious as you say, right?" Yu Qianqiu shrugged. "Wah." The sound of chairs moving rang out. Almost everyone stood up and pointed at Yu Qianqiu as they questioned him sternly. "Little brat, that's nonsense." With so many curses mixed together, it was almost impossible to hear them clearly. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He had never been cursed by so many people at once. From everyone's extreme reactions, it could be seen that the situation was indeed as serious as Ding Wei had said. There was a hint of a common enemy. Did these guys eat rat poison? Is it worth it? It was a pity that he wasn't Stephen Chow, who could scold a whole bunch of people by himself. Otherwise he could really fight it out. Therefore Yu Qianqiu frowned coldly at the thousands of fingers pointing at him. He was unfazed by the praise and humiliation. He planned to settle old scores with everyone after they were done scolding him. At first, Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. This brat was usually sharp-tongued, but now he knew what it meant to have the public's mouth melt gold. She had lived for more than 1,000 years and had never seen a person being scolded by so many people at once. However, after listening for a while, Nongzhu couldn't laugh anymore. It was a mess and she didn't know how long it would last. It was simply annoying. He immediately let out a cold snort that reverberated in the hall. The curses of the group of people finally stopped. Yu Qianqiu really had to give it to these people. They were like shrews cursing in the streets. In fact, he should have a deeper understanding of what it meant to anger the public. If Nongzhu and Wenrui were not sitting here, he reckoned that a group of people would have rushed up and beaten him up. "Everyone." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and looked around. "I am deeply aware of my mistake. Because of my momentary slip of the tongue, I have hurt the feelings of the majority of the cultivators in the cultivation world. Here I solemnly express my sincerest apology to everyone. I hope that you can spread my words and resolve this misunderstanding as soon as possible. I hope that we can bury the hatchet and build a better tomorrow for the cultivation world hand in hand. Thank you, everyone." His words were sincere and so was his attitude. Unfortunately, he didn't get the applause that Yu Qianqiu had expected. This speech was fresh and everyone needed some time to digest it. There was a short silence in the hall again. The innocent Farong was the first to come to her senses. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration. It turned out that words could be said in such a dignified way. Nongzhu frowned and exchanged a look with Wenrui. She muttered, "What nonsense are they talking about?" Someone came to his senses and cursed, "Damn it! You are from the cultivation world of Wuxia. You are not on the same side as us. Who wants to build a better tomorrow for the cultivation world hand in hand with you?" There was a lot of cursing, but the voices were much softer. Thanks to Nongzhu's cold snort, they had calmed down a lot. Ding Wei shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you have to pay the price for saying something wrong. How can you just apologize? If you do that, do we still need to fight and kill in the cultivation world?" "Damn it. This seems to be the line I used before." Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He said indifferently, "I have let you scold me and I have apologized. What else do you want?" Everyone was stunned. They really didn't know what to do with him. Everyone looked at Nongzhu. They all knew that Nongzhu was Yu Qianqiu's protection. If they angered him, no one present would have a good ending. Nongju smiled and drew circles on the tea table with her slender fingers. She smiled at Wenrui and said, "We will not interfere with the younger generation's business." He didn't even look at Yu Qianqiu, whose face was as cold as ice. Wenrui glanced at him and was startled. He nodded slightly, indicating that he would not interfere with the younger generation's business. The two soul-forming cultivators said that they would not interfere. Everyone was emboldened. Ding Wei shouted, "If you are really the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage, then show me what you are capable of. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave." "You want to fight?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. Ding Wei didn't want to waste time. He stretched out his hand and said, "I will fight you first. You are the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage." The meaning behind his words was clear. He wanted to fight. "You think you're worthy?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "I think you're tired of living, right?" The crowd was in an uproar. This guy obviously didn't take Ding Wei seriously. Ding Wei was so angry that he laughed and said, "Whether I am worthy or not is not a matter of words. Only after we fight will we know who is tired of living. Please." The hall was surrounded by the crowd. The space left in the middle was only a few square meters. If they were to fight, they really didn't know if it would be enough for two people to fight. "I don't want to fight." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "If you want to fight, then I'll fight. Who do you think I am?" He sat back in his seat as if it was none of his business. Nongju was stunned. This didn't seem like the Yu Qianqiu she heard about. "What do you mean by the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage? I think he's just a cowardly rat hiding his head and tail." Ding Wei cursed to his heart's content. The crowd immediately started to condemn him again. Their words were almost the same as Ding Wei's. Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly and slowly stood up. He reached out and pointed at Ding Wei and said, "You like to scold me? Once I make a move, I'm afraid you won't even have the chance to cry when you fall." He then pointed at the crowd and said disdainfully, "You are just a bunch of trash. Do you think you are worthy to bare your fangs and brandish your claws at me?" Nongju looked at him suspiciously. This guy's words were so soft and hard today. What was he trying to do? The extremely slanderous words made the crowd feel like they had eaten gunpowder. After sitting down for a while, they all jumped up again. Someone even shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, come and fight me if you have the guts." A 3-feet-long blue flying knife flew out of Ding Wei's storage bag. He raised it high and was ready to fight first. Yu Qianqiu pushed his hand and said, "Wait. I knew you were a coward who only put up a strong front." Ding Wei sneered. "You want to fight? No problem. But I don't do things that I don't have anything better to do." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd in disdain. He took out a storage bag and threw it on the tea table between him and Wenrui. He pointed at it and said, "There are 1,000,000 upper-grade spirit stones in there. If anyone beats me or kills me, this 1,000,000 upper-grade spirit stones will belong to him." Nongju was stunned. Was there something wrong with this kid's brain? He said he didn't do things that he didn't have anything better to do. The crowd was also stunned. Was there such a good thing? Then everyone nodded in understanding. This kid was probably feeling guilty and wanted to use the situation to make people think that he was confident and was just trying to scare them. Haha. Ding Wei laughed wildly. "Everyone, I'm sorry. Who told me to come out first? This 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones is mine." "What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianqiu immediately poured cold water on them. "This is a gamble of money and life. Anyone who wants to fight me and earn 1,000,000 spirit stones must first take out 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones as a wager. If you don't have money, don't embarrass yourself. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Let the rich fight. I'll fight you anytime." Ding Wei's arrogant smile froze on his face. The crowd was also stunned. The people here were not poor, but they did not have high positions in their sections. There were not many who could carry 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones with them. Nongju was suddenly enlightened. It turned out that this guy admitted defeat first to make everyone think that he was afraid of them. When a group of people unscrupulously criticized him, he ridiculed them so that they had no choice but to avenge their humiliation. Then he threw out a huge bet. This group of people was in a difficult position. Nongju squinted at everyone's expressions. Most people thought that Yu Qianqiu was bullying them because they did not have money. He wanted to scare them with a huge wager to avoid a fight. What they didn't know was that this kid wanted to kill people to earn money. He wanted to kill two birds with one stone. It seemed that Zi was right. Whatever this kid did, it was mostly related to money. "Ding Wei, if you don't have money, get someone else to come up. Don't just stand there." Yu Qianqiu sneered. Ding Wei said angrily, "I came in a hurry." Where do I have so many spirit stones to bet with you? You are clearly scared and purposely used money to make things difficult for others. TSK. If you really want to fight me, that is not a problem at all. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Mi Russian, who was standing at the side with his hands behind his back. This old thing was standing there calmly and did not say anything. How could he let He Zongming's people watch? He raised his finger and said, "It is normal that the guests did not bring money at the last minute. But I think the owner of this place wants to gather some spirit stones in his territory. If you really want to prove that you are not trash, you can borrow some from the owner. I think the owner is not so stingy." Chapter 489. Everyone looked at Mi Russian, not knowing what he would say. Mi Russian was shocked. He had been standing on the side and had not said a word. How did he get involved? Borrow money to fight? Ding Wei was dumbfounded. Everyone fell into silence again. Nongzhu was overjoyed. This brat was really vengeful. He had his eyes on He Zongming and would not let him go if he had the chance. How did Bai Changchun get such a precious disciple? I told you, you are a bunch of trash. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said, "Gambling without borrowing money is fake. You have no confidence in yourself. If you really have the confidence to defeat me, are you afraid of not being able to pay me back?" What a joke. No wonder people say that dogs that bark don't bite and dogs that bite don't bark. It is indeed true. Today I present these words to all of you, and I hope that all of you will kindly accept them. How dare you? How arrogant. The group was angered by these words. He actually called them dogs. Ding Wei's face turned red as he said, "Yu Qianqiu, why are you the one making the rules? Today has nothing to do with money. I'm going to fight you to the death." He wasn't going to take out any money to fight Yu Qianqiu head-on. Wait. Yu Qianqiu pushed his hand away and said to Mi Russian in a deep voice, "This is the territory of your light illumination peak. No matter what, I'm a guest. Now that someone wants to attack me, is your light illumination peak really going to ignore it? We're all guests, so how can you favor one over the other? Is this how your light illumination peak treats its guests?" With this accusation on him, Mi Russian knew he had to speak up. After all, he was the owner of this place. There were some rules that no one could break. He teleported between the two of them and said lightly, "We are all guests. We can talk things over." Since Mi Russian had already come out to stop them, Ding Wei naturally did not dare to be presumptuous in front of this cultivator in the last phase of Heaven's test. He put away the blue flying knife in his hand, pointed at Ding Wei and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you are so shameless. You said you would fight, but now you are cowering. Are you still a man?" Yu Qianqiu was too lazy to pay attention to him. He cupped his hands to Mi Russian and said, "High Priest, you have seen what happened, now I need you to come and uphold justice." Nongzhu smiled and said nothing. He wanted to see how this guy would end up talking nonsense. "How do you want me to uphold justice?" Mi Russian said expressionlessly. "Although they have the advantage in numbers, I'm not someone who's afraid of trouble. But if they take turns and I fight one after the other, won't I have to fight more than 300 rounds? Even if I win every round, I'll be exhausted to death." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "I admit that I increased the bet to reduce the pressure and eliminate those who can't afford it. Do you think it's too much for me to make a small request against more than 300 people, High Priest?" Mi Russian was not in a hurry to answer. He asked the crowd, "Do you think Yu Qianqiu's request is too much?" No matter how thick-skinned they were, when they heard this, it was 1 to 300. Who would have the nerve to say the word, too much? In the silence, Mi Russian nodded to Yu Qianqiu and said, "No one objected, your request is too much. Is this the justice you want me to uphold?" "The justice I want you to uphold is very simple." Yu Qianqiu pointed to the storage bag on the tea table and said, "Gambling with your life and money. If you can afford 1 million upper-level spiritual stones, I will play with you anytime. If someone can't afford it and still wants to pick a fight, then please uphold justice, High Priest." He glanced at Ding Wei as if saying that Ding Wei was the one who couldn't afford it and still wanted to pick a fight. Ding Wei's face turned red in anger. He gritted his teeth but couldn't do anything. Mi Russian was still expressionless. He asked the crowd, "Do you all agree that I will uphold justice?" After waiting for a while, no one spoke. He nodded and said, "Since no one objects, then I will accept it. You all do as you wish." Then he teleported back to his original position. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Ding Wei with disdain and said, "If you don't have the money, then leave. Don't stop other people from getting rich." When he said, "other people," it wasn't clear if he was talking about others or himself. If Ding Wei left obediently like this, he wouldn't be able to come out in the future, he would be laughed at to death. He had indeed reached the point where he couldn't back down. Making up his mind, he gritted his teeth and strode towards me Russian and said, "High Priest, can you temporarily lend me 1,000,000 upper-level spiritual stones? If I win, I will return it immediately. If I lose, my sect will not renege on this debt." When he said this, his face was full of shame and anger. Only by killing Yu Qianqiu would he be able to wash away his shame. Yu Qianqiu scratched his nose and said in a strange tone, "When borrowing money, first ask clearly if there is interest in case there is trouble afterwards. Don't look at me, I am reminding you out of goodwill." Ding Wei fiercely turned his head away, it was as if he had swallowed a fly. Logically, who would mention interest when borrowing spirit stones like this? Me Russian didn't rely on lending spirit stones to earn interest to survive. But since someone reminded him, how could he be thick-skinned and pretend he didn't know? He gritted his teeth and said, "High Priest, about the interest?" Me Russian waved his hand to stop him from continuing. If he really asked for Ding Wei's interest in front of so many people, then he would really offend his sect. He said indifferently, "There is no interest." He already took out a storage ring and threw it over. "Thank you, High Priest." Ding Wei took the storage ring and thanked him. He turned around and strode over, holding the storage ring and yelled, "Yu Qianqiu, let's see what else you have to say now." "Of course I have something to say." Yu Qianqiu shrugged and said, "The bet should be given to a person of virtue and prestige that we both trust. It can't be given to you or me." Ding Wei snorted and didn't say anything. Obviously he agreed with this. The two of them looked at the two soul-forming cultivators at the same time. When it came to virtue and prestige, no one here could compare to the two of them. When Nongzhu heard this, he rubbed his hands and laughed, "If that's the case, then I will reluctantly do it." They were masters in the middle stage of soul-forming, of course they wouldn't stain their spirit stones. Ding Wei didn't say anything and was about to hand over the storage ring to Nongzhu. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Wait, I am a little worried about handing the spirit stones to Mr. Nongzhu. It's better to give it to Senior Wenrui." Everyone was stunned. Nongzhu was his umbrella. He didn't trust Nongzhu but Wenrui? Ding Wei was about to go crazy from being tormented by this person. He didn't know if he should hand over the storage bag in his hand or not. Nongzhu also reached out his hand, but he didn't know whether to take it or not. He stared at Yu Qianqiu angrily. How dare he embarrass him in front of so many people? There was no need to explain. Yu Qianqiu just didn't trust Nongzhu. Now that the money was in Nongzhu's hands, others might be able to get it back, but it would be difficult for him. Especially his proactive response, it made people even more suspicious. Yu Qianqiu pushed the storage ring to Wenrui and said, "Senior Wenrui, please take care of it for now. If I lose or something happens to me, give this storage ring to the person who defeats me." Wenrui glanced at Nongzhu, who was leaning on the chair with her eyes closed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He put the storage ring on the tea table. With his cultivation, if Nongzhu didn't insist on coming, who would come to join in the fun? People in the soul-forming stage were usually heard but not seen. It was even more impossible for them to work for others. Ding Wei awkwardly took back the storage ring and didn't dare to look at Nongzhu again. He pushed the storage ring to Wenrui and said the same thing as Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu dared to say that he didn't trust Nongzhu. Ding Wei didn't dare to say that he didn't trust Wenrui, so he gave the storage ring to Wenrui for safekeeping. "Please." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand gently. It was about to begin. Everyone was instantly refreshed. Even Nongzhu opened her eyes, forgetting about the temporary unhappiness. "Yu Qianqiu." Furong suddenly stood up, the worry in her eyes was obvious. Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly and glared at her. Furong sat back down in embarrassment. Ding Wei stepped back and was instantly refreshed. Finally he could avenge his humiliation. He looked at the young couple and laughed. "Yu Qianqiu, if you have any last words, tell your woman. I'll give you the time." The surrounding people also laughed along with him. Yu Qianqiu had just put on a smiling face for Furong. When he heard this, he slowly turned around. There was no expression on his face. He asked calmly, "How do you want to die?" Ding Wei snorted and nodded. "You're about to die and you still dare to talk big." The blue flying knife once again flew above his head. Yu Qianqiu spread out his sleeves and a dozen green lights flashed out, circling around his body. Everyone present stared at the green flying swords with twinkling eyes. They had heard that Yu Qianqiu could control multiple flying swords at the same time, but this was the first time they had seen it. Out of everyone present, only Nongzhu knew that these flying swords were formed from green flames. The flying swords danced around him as Yu Qianqiu walked towards Ding Wei expressionlessly. He said indifferently, "If I say you're trash, then you're trash. I'll let you make the first move. I want to see who's the trash." Ding Wei roared angrily, and the blue saber above his head began to spin faster and faster. One saber became two, two became four, until it became 8, and then it stopped increasing. Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. He didn't know if it was an illusion or if the blue knife was also a treasure. Swoosh swoosh. The 8 rapidly spinning blue knives were like 8 blue plates. With a swoosh sound they suddenly spread out. Yu Qianqiu looked to his left and right. The blue revolving flying daggers had already surrounded him from all directions and were rapidly approaching him. *CK. This thing might be useful to scare others, but you want to play this game with me? Let's see who's surrounded. Yu Qianqiu activated his sword art. The protective flying sword immediately split into 8 green lights. They quickly clashed with the 8 flying knives, making a series of metal clanging sounds. Then he waved his sleeves. Hundreds of green lights instantly flew out from his sleeves and scattered around the hall, dazzling everyone's eyes. By the time the flying sword stopped spinning, everyone realized that Ding Wei was already surrounded by hundreds of flying swords. Chapter 490. It's over. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Ding Wei himself was scared out of his wits. He had never experienced the feeling of being surrounded by so many flying swords. The fight had just begun and it had already become like this. What was the point of fighting? 8 spinning blue flying daggers quickly flew back from the gaps between the densely packed flying swords. They danced around his body trying to protect him. However, the 8 flying knives could only protect a limited area. No matter how fast they were, it would be difficult to block the simultaneous attack of hundreds of flying swords. There had to be a loophole. Thus, without saying anything, he released his shield of vigor. Yu Qianqiu stared at him with a look of disdain. The flying swords were ready to attack, but they did not attack. It was as if they were waiting for him to prepare his defense. It was clear that he had a card up his sleeve. Everyone sighed inwardly. Ding Wei was probably doomed. Furong patted her chest lightly. She could also see that her man was going to win. Nongzhu did not say anything. He had expected this to happen. If he could not even deal with a nascent soul cultivator, then Yu Qianqiu did not deserve to be the disciple of the world's most powerful cultivator. I really don't understand. There are people in the tribulation stage here. They don't come out, so why did you, a nascent soul cultivator, come out? Aren't you taking your life as a joke? Can you tell me why? Yu Qianqiu asked with a puzzled expression. Ding Wei shouted angrily, Yu Qianqiu, don't put on airs here. It's not certain who will win. The 8 blue flying knives spun faster and faster, moving quickly outside the shield of vigor. Killing you is as easy as taking something out of my pocket. How can these broken knives stop me? Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and said, but I'll give you a chance to live. Do you want it? Now the atmosphere was finally not as lively as before. Only the swishing sound of the blue knives could be heard. Everyone listened attentively, waiting for Ding Wei's answer. Ding Wei did not answer immediately. Obviously he was a little moved by Yu Qianqiu's words, but he could not show weakness. He immediately shouted, if you have something to say, say it. Don't be so wishy-washy. There's always a price to pay for doing something wrong. Pointing 2 fingers at the ground, Yu Qianqiu sneered, admit that you're trash, kneel and beg for mercy, and I'll spare your life. Wah! The audience was in an uproar. This guy was too arrogant. However, Ding Wei, who was surrounded by flying swords, did not make a sound. As there were too many flying swords, no one could see his expression clearly. Everyone looked at each other. Would Ding Wei really agree to this? They didn't know that Ding Wei was trembling in anger and couldn't even speak. The other party was clearly humiliating him in public. This was also Yu Qianqiu's revenge on the bird who provoked him first. Why aren't you talking? Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, it doesn't matter if you die, but it's a pity that you'll leave a huge debt for the sect after you die. Fortunately, the head priest doesn't want you to pay interest. Yu Qianqiu, go to hell. Ding Wei finally let out an angry roar. 8 blue swords whistled as they swept over in an arc. Yu Qianqiu flicked his finger and dozens of flying swords flew out, immediately entangling the blue swords. With a cold expression he said, I have to admit, if you met other nascent soul stage cultivators, your 8 blue swords would indeed pose a great threat to them, making it hard for them to take care of everything. Unfortunately, you met me and I only have 8 blue swords. With that said, he waved his sleeves and a black shadow flashed out, shooting into the encirclement of swords. Everyone had yet to figure out what was going on. A mournful scream suddenly rang out. The 8 blue swords suddenly fell to the ground powerlessly. Before they landed, they reformed into one and fell to the ground with a ding-dang. Everyone was shocked, but they saw Yu Qianqiu wave his hand lightly, retrieving the black shadow that shot out. The swords instantly surged violently. A cloud of red mist began to spread, and the thick smell of blood began to fill the entire hall. After hundreds of blue flying swords continuously flashed back into Yu Qianqiu's sleeves, Ding Wei had already disappeared. Everyone immediately understood that Ding Wei had already been turned into dust by the flying swords. This thick smell of blood was... Everyone waved their hands and stirred, forcing the disgusting blood mist out of the hall. Yu Qianqiu picked up the blue swords on the ground and looked at them, then casually threw them into his storage bag. When everyone looked at him again, their hearts were a little cold. What a powerful sword art. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of Wenrui and smiled. I won, this spirit stone is mine. Wenrui didn't say a word, nor did he express any attitude. Whoever won could come and take it themselves. As a dignified soul formation expert, how could he really help these people do this? His role was to make sure that no one dared to snatch things from him. He picked up the 2 storage bags and showed them to everyone. Is there anyone who is unconvinced? Bring out the money. Gambling with money in life, I will continue to play with you. He returned to his seat, hugged the storage bags and counted the spirit stones as he continued. If you don't have money, you can borrow from the head elder. In his territory, don't mention 2 million, even 1 or 200 million is no problem. Hurry up, don't miss out. Russian stared at him indifferently. The group of people no longer said he was talking nonsense. They looked at each other and finally looked at the few tribulation-passing early-stage cultivators. Unfortunately, no one jumped out like Ding Wei. Yu Qianqiu put away one of the storage bags and glanced at everyone. He thought, anyway, don't think about being free. Rather than waiting for you to find me, I might as well find you. From today onwards, I will go all out. If I don't turn this place upside down, I won't be called Yu Qianqiu. I said you are trash, but you are still unconvinced. Shouting is useless. If you have the guts, show me your actions. Yu Qianqiu put the storage bag he earned back on the coffee table next to Wenrui and pointed at it. If you have the guts, bring out the money to gamble. If you don't have the guts, take a detour when you see me. Don't bark like a dog. What the hell is this? Wow. Everyone was finally enraged and stood up one by one. Nongzhu looked at him in shock and thought, this guy is crazy. Does he want to go against the entire cultivation world by saying this? However, this was not the craziest thing. Yu Qianqiu also stood up and pointed at the crowd. His face was filled with disdain as he said, don't be unconvinced. I can't be bothered to fight you all one by one. As long as you have the money, it doesn't matter if you all come at me together. I will take you all on alone. Wenrui and Nongzhu looked at each other as if they were asking Nongzhu who this guy was. He was too arrogant. Everyone here represented a faction. Wouldn't that be offending all the countries? Would he still want to live in the future? Nongzhu shook her head with a wry smile. Furong's mouth turned into a circle. Although she did not know where these people came from, she was still shocked by Yu Qianqiu's words. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 people flashed out from the crowd almost at the same time. The 3 of them looked at each other in shock. Obviously, they did not expect such a coincidence. It seemed like they were really going to fight 3 against 1. For a moment, they were stunned and felt a little embarrassed. It's okay, it's okay. I have always been a man of my word. My words are like water that has been spilled. Let's fight together. Yu Qianqiu's bellicose nature was completely stimulated. For a moment, he was full of fighting spirit and was ready to test the hard work he had put in all these years. To be honest, ever since he defeated 2 cultivators at the end of the passing calamity stage, he had long looked down on ordinary cultivators. Fighting someone like Ding Wei was not satisfying at all. However, he did not get too excited. He pointed at the storage bag on the coffee table and said, put down 1 million upper-level spirit stones. Those who don't have spirit stones can go back. Since he had said so, who would be polite with him? After seeing Yu Qianqiu fight, the 3 of them were not confident that they could defeat him. However, as cultivators at the passing calamity stage, if they did not stand up for him, they would not be able to raise their heads when they went back. They had no choice but to come out. Now, it was exactly what the 3 of them wanted. A person in a blue robe walked over. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed slightly. This outfit was very familiar. Sure enough, the person said in a deep voice, Xiushui country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Yin Feng seeks advice. Then he bowed to the two soul formation stage cultivators, took out a storage bag and placed it beside Wenrui. Tuan country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Wu Yenkai seeks advice. A black-robed person also put down a storage bag. West Asian country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Yuan Tonghai seeks advice. A gray-robed person also put down a storage bag like the previous two. The three passing calamity stage cultivators attacked together. This time it was enough to make that kid suffer. The crowd cheered loudly. They all stood up and clamored, hoping that the three of them would make Yu Qianqiu die a horrible death. It seems that there are still a few rich people. Yu Qianqiu stood up in high spirits, thinking that he could fight to his heart's content. Suddenly, a figure flashed in the middle of the group. Mi Russian said expressionlessly, "Don't fight first. This is the Dayang country's palace. It can't withstand your torment. Let's go somewhere else. Follow me." After saying that, he took the lead and flashed out of the hall, flying into the sky. The few of them looked at each other, grabbed their own storage bags and followed. Before Yu Qianqiu left, he said to Furong and followed Senior Nongzhu. The group of people dispersed, flashed out of the hall and flew away like a swarm. In the blink of an eye, only Nongzhu, Wenrui, Wenbai and Furong were left in the hall. There were also a dozen disciples from Guangguang Peak who were at a loss. Wenrui asked Nongzhu, "What should we do?" Nongzhu rubbed her hands and said with a smile, "This kid doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He must have taken a strong medicine today. Let's go and take a look." After saying that, she grabbed Furong's hand and flew away. Wenrui shook his head with a bitter smile and waved at Wenbai. The two of them also followed. The hall suddenly became empty. The tables and chairs were in a mess. The remaining Foundation establishment disciples looked at each other. The ordinary people in the palace didn't notice, but some cultivators noticed the group of people flying away. They didn't know what happened. On the various stages, the competition had already begun. Zhang Peng, who had just won a match with a few punches and kicks, also noticed the group of cultivators flying away. He wanted to follow them, but his master didn't allow him to. He could only hold back his anger and continue to compete with the ordinary people. Chapter 491. A group of cultivators suddenly flew out of the palace and headed west, immediately alerting all the cultivators in Dayang City who had gathered here. One by one they found a remote corner and quickly chased after them, out of the sight of mortals. After everyone arrived, they realized that Mi Russian really knew how to find a place. This place was the flat land formed by Yin Baikong's raging attack on 6 mountain peaks. This place was remote and deep in the mountains, making it difficult for mortals to enter. Moreover, the place was wide and flat enough, at least a few thousand square meters. Although Yu Qianqiu had heard of Yin Baikong's mountain-building movement from Wenrui and Nongzhu, he was still shocked when he saw it with his own eyes. Oh my! This expert in the late stage of soul formation was really something. Not to mention creating the world. He still had the ability to collapse the mountains and split the earth. Originally, there were only about 300 cultivators from the palace. Now that cultivators from Dayang City came to make up the number had increased by almost 10 times, almost 3,000 people. Their cultivation levels were high and low. There were many in the Foundation establishment stage, and it seemed that there were also many in the late stage of tribulation passing. This remote mountain suddenly became bustling with noise and excitement. The cultivators from Dayang City didn't know about it, so they found their acquaintances from the palace. After asking about the cause of the matter, they were all furious. In an instant, there was a wave of angry voices scolding Yu Qianqiu in the remote mountain. "Scold slowly. I won't lose a piece of flesh." Yu Qianqiu still looked as if he was facing thousands of fingers. When faced with such a situation, the best choice was to not speak. Previously, he couldn't even win against 300 people. Now, there was no need to even mention it when it was 1 against 3,000. Therefore he let them scold. That was the best choice. Nongzhu looked around happily, clicking her tongue non-stop. What a spectacular scene. He was being scolded by 3,000 people at the same time. When he returned, he must tell Bai Changchun about this unique scene and let him know that the disciple of the world's #1 expert was indeed extraordinary. Presumably, old Bai would turn pale with fright. Hibiscus looked at her surroundings. It was as if she was a small boat in the middle of a raging storm. The huge waves around her could come crashing over at any time and swallow Yu Qianqiu in one gulp. He then looked at the sneering Yu Qianqiu. His expression was filled with disdain. There was not a hint of panic or fear on his face. She suddenly had an epiphany. This man's life must have been filled with danger and excitement. He must have been used to ups and downs. Compared to her peaceful life on Fuxian Island, it was completely different. With the two soul formation stage experts holding the fort, although the scolding got louder and louder, it didn't cause any trouble. Several hundred square meters of space gradually emptied out. There were only 4 people left in the center: Yu Qianqiu, Yan Feng, Wu Yankai, and Yuan Tonghai. A trace of fierceness flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He swung his hand and threw the storage pouch at the feet of Wenrui and Nongzhu. The person standing in the middle was none other than Farong. Immediately after, the other 3 people also threw their storage pouches over. People kept shouting, "Beat him to death! Kill him!" Yu Qianqiu looked around and took out 2 items from the storage pouch with both hands. 2 black machetes that were almost 2 meters long appeared again. They were held in his left and right hands and were very eye-catching. Once the 2 machetes were taken out, the scolding stopped and everyone started whispering to each other. The topic of discussion was the saber drawing assembly that they had heard of. These 2 machetes should be the 2 legendary treasured machetes. They didn't expect this guy to be carrying them with him all this time. In an instant, all kinds of greedy expressions appeared in many people's eyes. Just like when Yu Qianqiu killed Ding Wei. When Ding Wei died, his blue flying knife was picked up by Yu Qianqiu. No one said anything. If anyone could kill Yu Qianqiu, then his 2 treasured machetes. Yan Feng's eyes narrowed. He heard that Yan Feng, who went to China, died under these machetes. The other 2 people looked at the machetes with burning eyes. It was a pity that there were only 2 machetes. It was destined that one of them wouldn't be able to get it. Yan Feng slowly took out an iron-colored whip that was rolled up together. Yu Qianqiu glanced at it. It seemed like the Xiushui country's rumor sect was most proficient in using whips. Back then, the senior and junior brothers with the surname Yan who died in the 100 Flowers Valley used whips. It seemed like this person's whip wasn't as long as the other 3's, but it looked much longer. Wu Yankai used a flying sword. Yuan Tonghai used a bow and arrows. It was a blood-red longbow and even the bowstring was red. It was unknown what it was made of. A quiver was slung on his back, and the arrows inside were also blood-red. Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. There were people who used bows and arrows as artifacts. What if the arrows in the quiver ran out? Now, he really felt the difference between the cultivation world of various countries and the cultivation world of China. The latter almost all used flying swords, while the former used all kinds of strange weapons. The 4 people he met today all had different weapons. Luckily, I can wield a machete too. Russian saw that they were in position and said expressionlessly, "We'll start here. Everyone, let's begin." The moment he said that, Yan Feng and the other 2 dodged and surrounded Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his 2 machetes and shouted, "Watch out for my machete." He quickly chased after Yan Feng. He had fought with people from Rumor Sect in the 100 Flowers Valley and was experienced in dealing with people who used whips. As for the others, they didn't know what was going on. Yan Feng waved his hand and a whip that was tens of meters long coiled around the charging Yu Qianqiu. It seemed like he wanted to trap Yu Qianqiu. Chop! Yu Qianqiu shouted and slashed with his machete. Suddenly, a whistling sound came from behind him. It sounded very imposing and powerful. He didn't even need to look to know that one of the other 2 had made a move. He didn't have time to deal with the whip. Without a second word, he quickly dodged to the side. Using the opportunity to flip in midair, he saw that it was Wu Yankai's flying sword. Cultivators cultivated flying swords because they were easier to control than most weapons. Furthermore, they were very nimble. Indeed, the moment Yu Qianqiu dodged, the flying sword turned and shot over without stopping. At the same time, Yan Feng's whip also whistled over. Yu Qianqiu was still in midair when he saw Yuan Tonghai pulling out 3 arrows from the quiver on his back. He knocked them all and shot them out. The 3 arrows shot out at the same time, leaving a trail of blood in the air as they crossed each other. Damn! The arrow was even curved. Yu Qianqiu shouted again, "Watch out for my treasured saber." Before he landed on the ground, he used the saber in his right hand to meet the incoming whip. At the same time, he used the saber in his left hand to cut it. Dang! Po! 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 The long whip that was circling over broke into 5 or 6 pieces. Yan Feng was startled and did not dare to send out the remaining whip. At the same time, Wu Yankai felt a heartache. His flying sword was also broken into 2 by the saber. It fell to the ground and became 2 pieces of scrap metal. It couldn't fly anymore. There was an uproar outside the arena. These 2 treasured sabers were too sharp. They cut the sword and the whip like they were cutting tofu. Weapons that could be used by cultivators in the Tribulation realm weren't the Dharma artifacts of ordinary cultivators. Moreover, the weapons in the hands of these three people were indeed Dharma treasures. Instantly, everyone stared at the two treasured sabers with even more fervor. This was because they had verified that they were indeed rare treasures. Yu Qianqiu wasn't in the mood to care about what the people outside the arena thought. He still had to deal with the three incoming arrows. The saber was big enough. Once he landed on the ground, he put the two sabers together and used them as a shield. Dang dang dang. Although the flying sword blocked the arrows, Yu Qianqiu slid more than 10 meters away from the impact. A straight line immediately appeared on the soft ground. Nongzhu shook her head slightly. This was the difference in cultivation. It was a flaw that couldn't be made up for. Yu Qianqiu's arms were numb from the impact. He almost let go of the two sabers. However, the three arrows that were also sent flying spun in the air and fell straight back into the quiver on Yuan Tonghai's back. Damn it! What kind of lousy arrows are they? They can go home by themselves. Yu Qianqiu shook his arm and rushed towards Yan Feng again. Who asked Yanji to threaten me? If I don't kill you first, who else can I kill? This time he learned his lesson. A flying sword flew out from his sleeve. When he jumped up, the flying sword immediately carried him and rushed towards Yanji. Why do you keep staring at me? Wu Yankai doesn't have anything in his hands and you don't want to go. Yan Feng was speechless. He casually swung his broken whip and stabbed it straight towards Yu Qianqiu like a javelin. Wu Yankai and Yuan Tonghai naturally wouldn't leave Yan Feng alone. They couldn't let Yu Qianqiu deal with one and then turn around to deal with them. Wu Yankai took out another flying sword from his storage bag. Although it wasn't as good as the previous one, it was still useful. Yuan Tonghai grabbed an arrow and knocked it. Nobody knew how he used it, but 7 or 8 blood shadow lines shot out. Go to hell. Yu Qianqiu roared and threw the 2 treasured sabers into his storage bag. He realized that although the treasured sabers were easy to use, they weren't very practical. He had to rush up and slash. It was fine to use them against people with similar cultivation, but it was more suitable for sneak attacks against people with higher cultivation. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to get close to them. He kept the sabers and flew up into the sky on his sword, avoiding the 3's attacks. Wu Yankai and the other 2 nodded at each other and quickly shot up into the sky, chasing after them. The surrounding spectators immediately cheered. Furong clasped her hands together nervously. Nongzhu glanced at her and said, "Don't worry. This brat has many trump cards. He hasn't used any of them yet. He won't die." When Rui tilted his head and looked, he didn't expect Nongzhu to be so confident in Yu Qianqiu. Just in time. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the air and sneered. "I was afraid that the 3 of you would scatter too far and I wouldn't be able to catch up. It's best if you come together." He turned around and dove down. His sleeves swelled up and an endless stream of green shadows flashed out. In an instant, thousands of flying swords appeared, covering the sky and covering the earth as they flew towards the 3 people below. The momentum of the thunderous sword rain made the surrounding people dumbfounded. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would believe that someone could actually control thousands of swords at the same time? So many flying swords. The 3 people who were chasing after them were dumbfounded at first. Then they were scared out of their wits. They realized that they had fallen into a trap. They hurriedly stopped and split up without saying a word, fleeing in panic. However, with their cultivation, their flying speed wasn't fast enough to outrun the flying swords. Moreover, they were lured by Yu Qianqiu and then attacked so suddenly. How could they escape so easily? Chapter 492. The sudden turn of events stunned the people who had been cheering loudly just now. Yu Qianqiu put his palms together in front of his chest and controlled the thousands of flying swords to chase in 3 different directions. Qing Yaoyao's sword shadows rushed forward and quickly caught up to the 3. In the face of danger, the 3 released their protective aura at the same time and temporarily blocked the flying sword's attack. The flying swords in the air formed 3 green thorny balls. Yu Qianqiu glanced at them and opened his palms. 3 black shadows shot out and directly entered the flying swords that formed the balls. Ah! 3 screams sounded in the air. The people below thought it's over. Yu Qianqiu waved his arms and the thousands of flying swords rushed back into his sleeves. 3 flying swords carried 3 storage bags and sent them to him. 4 cultivators who could casually take out 1,000,000, the items in their storage bags would probably not be too bad, so he naturally had to accept them. The 3 corpses fell from the sky. This place was newly excavated, so the soil was very soft. The 3 corpses smashed out half a deep pit and were embedded in the ground. This time he didn't destroy the corpses. He wanted to intimidate everyone and tell everyone, that 3 early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators had been killed by him. In the future, those nascent soul cultivators shouldn't bark in front of me. Farong covered her mouth in shock. The man who grew spirit herbs with her in Wanfeng Garden had actually become so powerful. In the blink of an eye, he killed 3 early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators? The grand scene of the thousands of flying swords shocked her even more. He was as mighty as a god. The flying swords flew straight down. Once they landed, the flying swords bounced up and went into his sleeves. Everyone's eyes stared at his sleeves. There were so many flying swords inside. Could it be that there were 2 storage bags tied inside? Yu Qianqiu picked up the storage bags at Furong's feet. After putting them away, he strode back to the center of the field and said loudly, "Who else is unconvinced? I still stand by my words. Those who can take out the money can come and compete with me. There's no limit to the number of people." As he said this, he waved his hand and pointed in a half circle. "If you can afford it, it's fine if you all come at me together." Then he pointed at me Russian and said, "Those who are capable but don't have the money, you can find Great Minister Me to solve the problem. He has already borrowed money once before. I believe he won't favor one over another and look down on others." Me Russian stared coldly at him. Even though he did not say anything, the faint murderous intent around him could be felt by the people standing nearby. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and sneered. "Now that I've revealed my 2 treasured sabers, I don't believe that no one will covet them. I want to see how much money your illumination peak has to lend out. I want to see if you'll lend it out or not. It's not easy to offend people, especially if he offended a lot of people. At the same time, it would be a headache if one family did not return the money, but if everyone did not return the money together, it would be infuriating." The people around them were whispering to each other. Yu Qianqiu waited for a while and shouted, "Is there no one here? If no one comes, then I'll leave." As he spoke, he began to walk back. "Wait." Almost a dozen people shouted at the same time. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw a group of people discussing something. Then they all nodded. "Oh my." More than 50 people walked out together. The leader pointed at him and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you said it yourself that it's fine if you all come at me together. I have 58 people here. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Damn it. Is there someone in the soul transformation stage hiding here?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at this group of people and then felt relieved. With Nongzhu here, it was impossible that she would not say anything even if she saw someone in the soul transformation stage. Although Nongzhu always contradicted him, she would not act recklessly on some major issues. Even if she did not give face to him, she would give face to her master. "I, Yu Qianqiu, am famous in the Wuxia cultivation world for being a man of my words. What I say is like spilled water, I can't take it back. You can doubt anything but don't doubt my credibility." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest loudly and said, "Of course, no matter how many of you come, I can't miss a piece of spirit stones. 58 people, 58 million upper-level spirit stones. If you miss a piece, I won't accompany you." The group of people looked at each other, nodded and walked to Me Russian together. Before they could speak, Me Russian's usually calm face was already twitching. He didn't need to ask to guess the intentions of these people, to borrow spirit stones. Sure enough, the group of people bowed in unison. The leader cupped his hands and said, "High Priest, we only have about 8 million upper-grade spirit stones on us. We hope that High Priest can lend us 50 million upper-grade spirit stones. We will definitely return it to you." His tone was very firm, as if it was not difficult to return the money. They probably thought that this time they had more people, they would definitely win. Once Yu Qianqiu heard this, it would be lively if everyone cooperated to borrow money. Once this kind of money was lent out, if there were 1 or 2 people who did not acknowledge the debt, then the money could not be recovered. Everyone would definitely push the blame to each other, unless everyone was self-conscious. But this kind of hope was very slim. When it came to the matter of returning the money, everyone would first shrink back and wait to see if the other party would return the money. If the other party did return the money, then it would be fine. It seemed that the chain reaction of waiting and watching was to wait and see. If the other party did not return the money, why should I return the money? In Yu Qianqiu's previous life, when he had just started out in the business world, he had helped people collect their debts. Many bosses had encountered such a group of scoundrels, and after going through all sorts of trouble, they still couldn't collect their money. That was why they would look for people like him to forcibly collect their debts. Similar things were common, so Yu Qianqiu was happy. Me Russian frowned slightly, as if he also felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Yu Qianqiu shout loudly, "Since you want to borrow money, can you be more sincere?" Wow. Bow more deeply, don't make it seem like they have to lend you money. If it were me, I would only say one thing, I don't have that much money with me and I won't lend it to you. More than 50 people looked back at the same time, and the leader snorted coldly, this is our business, you don't need to worry about it. Ah. I am a dog catching mice, meddling in other people's business, you guys continue. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said cheerfully. Nongzhu, who was quite familiar with his character, couldn't help but laugh. This guy was too bad, he just wouldn't let go of Hua Zongming's people. At that time she was afraid that if she couldn't get the money back, it would be equivalent to throwing it away for nothing. Even if she could get the money back, it would cause complaints from the other families, and they would blame him for lending money to these people to die. Nongzhu didn't think that these people would definitely be able to take advantage of Yu Qianqiu just because they had the advantage in numbers. From the faintly discernible murderous aura between this guy's eyebrows, it could be seen that this guy seemed to have made up his mind to start a massacre. Perhaps he was determined to make things big today. So, it seemed that those old things had forced this guy to do something desperate. This guy was going to use force. Mi Russian looked at Yu Qianqiu and a hint of fierceness flashed across his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He really wanted to say something like that to tactfully refuse, but Yu Qianqiu exposed his secret in advance and immediately fell into an impasse. There was a trap in front and behind him, even if he borrowed it, it would still be a trap. If he didn't borrow it, he would fall right into the trap just now, and he didn't know what this group of people would think. It's not that I don't want to lend it, but I don't have many spiritual stones on me, only about 3 million left, how can I take out 50 million? Moreover, I've never carried so many spiritual stones on me before. You can't expect me to go back to Guangguang Peak to get it now, can you? He then took out a storage bag and handed it to them, if it can help you then take it. The 50 people looked at each other, not knowing whether to take it or not, and immediately began to discuss with each other. Damn it. Old people really aren't vegetarians, they're like a lizard cutting off its tail to survive, sacrificing the pawn to save the rook. Yu Qianqiu silently cursed. After Mi Russian did this, no one else would ask to borrow from him in the future. The group still borrowed the 3 million, and then everyone began to shake out their storage bags, gathering spiritual stones there. A group of cultivators with decent cultivation. For the money for a fight, they actually needed more than 50 people to come together. In the imperial sky Queen Earth, the mountain wind blew gently, under the gaze of thousands of people, the 58 people, including the old and the strong, all dug into their storage bags. That scene made many people's hearts ache. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a while, even he himself felt that he couldn't watch it anymore, if he continued to watch he might not be able to kill them later. Of the original 58 people, 47 left under Yu Qianqiu's dumbfounded expression, and the remaining 11 seemed to be the ones with the highest cultivation. It seemed that they felt that they had a better chance of winning the fight. Nongzhu's voice immediately sounded in Yu Qianqiu's ears. Among these 11 people, 6 are at the early stage of passing calamity, and the rest are at the late stage of gathering vitality. Be careful, kid. The leader, carrying a storage bag, walked to Wenrui respectfully, bowed, and then put the storage bag at Wenrui's feet, then turned around and walked back. Wenrui suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. The scene of gathering spiritual stones was really a bit sad. He suddenly felt that he was one of the main culprits. He turned around and took a look at Nongzhu, but the latter was blinking her eyes and trying to hold back her laughter. After that person returned to his original position, he waved his hand at Yu Qianqiu, who was in a daze, and shouted, "Where's your 1 million upper spiritual stones?" Yu Qianqiu came to his senses, trotted to Wenrui, squatted on the ground, took out a storage bag, put down his own, and picked up the one that was put by the person just now. When that person saw this, he was about to open his mouth to ask what he was doing, but found that this guy squatted on the ground and seemed to be counting the spiritual stones in the storage bag. The person opened his mouth to say something, but he swallowed it back. It was not wrong for Wenrui to check whether there were fewer spiritual stones in the storage bag. What could he say? If he went to check, Yu Qianqiu would also have nothing to say. He is also a person with a master's background, he will not leave you out in public. Wenrui really could not stand it anymore and could not help but say, "That's not necessarily true. The more famous a family is, the more they like to do despicable and shameless things. 8 million is not a small number." When Yu Qianqiu said this, he also finished counting the spiritual stones, nodded and said, "That's a good number." Nongzhu could not help but ridicule, "Kid, aren't you a little too explicit? Don't you feel ashamed?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a look that said it's none of your business, then immediately waved to the 11 people and said, "Let's start." Then he took out a flying sword from his sleeve, stepped on it, and flew straight to the sky, this time flying very high. Chapter 493. When Rui looked at Nongzhu in confusion. It was incredible that a cultivator in the Yuanying realm dared to be rude to a cultivator in the middle stage of Huashan realm again and again. The strangest thing was that Nongzhu didn't seem to take it seriously. Especially when Yu Qianqiu was facing Huazongming and the others, it seemed that he didn't care about a group of cultivators in the Huashan realm at all. Yu Qianqiu's background made Wen Rui deeply suspicious, and this was not the first time. The 11 cultivators quickly took out their weapons and chased up into the sky. However, as soon as they reached midair, they spread out into a circle and surrounded him as they chased after him. Obviously, after seeing what happened to the 3 people in front of them, they were afraid of Yu Qianqiu's thunderous sword rain, so they didn't dare to chase him directly. Instead, they scattered and surrounded him. The wind blew the clouds. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the sky and stared at the people who were chasing him. He said to himself, "Kind people will be bullied and kind horses will be ridden. If I don't scare you today, I'm afraid that in the future, everyone will want to fight with me. Who can deal with them? It seems that my master's method of frightening the demon realm is worth learning. I should use thunderous methods to frighten ghosts and monsters. Kill." He grabbed 2 yellow talismans in his hands and threw them out. A series of explosions sounded in the sky, and thick smoke rolled and spread, covering Yu Qianqiu. He used the smoke talisman. The 11 people who were chasing him stopped and didn't dare to move forward rashly. After a while, the wind in the sky became stronger, and the spreading smoke gradually dispersed. Yu Qianqiu's figure appeared again in the sky on his sword. The 11 people looked at each other from afar. They didn't know what was going on, but they didn't dare to act recklessly. They didn't know what tricks Yu Qianqiu was playing. The thousands of people who were watching the battle looked at each other and didn't understand what Yu Qianqiu meant. Nongzhu pinched her chin and frowned. What tricks is he playing now? Yu Qianqiu, who was in the air, stared blankly at the dispersing smoke for a while. Then he muttered to himself with an awkward expression, "Damn, how could I forget that the wind is too strong at high altitudes?" Originally, he wanted to set up a smoke screen in the air and then use his advantage of being able to control 1,000 swords to launch a sneak attack. Who knew that as soon as the smoke screen appeared, it would be blown away by the strong wind at high altitudes. Even he had fooled himself, let alone others. Unless it was a roundworm in his stomach, no one would be able to guess what he was playing at. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 11 people who were biding their time. "What are you guys so nervous about?" At this moment, a white cloud came along with the wind and covered his figure once again. When the white cloud floated past, Yu Qianqiu revealed a look of realization. He patted his forehead and casually took out 2 smoke talismans. After a series of explosions, the smoke spread again in an instant and enveloped him. Others could not see what was happening inside, but he opened his arms in the smoke, and thick white fog gushed out from his body. Everyone found that after the smoke was blown away by the wind again, a white cloud appeared in the sky. The white cloud surged and expanded continuously. Gradually, it spread nearly a kilometer in the air before stopping. To everyone's surprise, all the surrounding white clouds were drifting with the wind, but this one was the only one that stayed in the air. Such a strange thing, everyone knew without guessing that it was Yu Qianqiu's doing. Even Nongzhu, who was below, looked up and was stunned. She said, "Is there anything that this guy can't do? He can actually make clouds?" Last time, the miraculous method of making flowers and trees wither with the passage of time had already made him feel that it was incredible. Now that he had played with something new, it was an eye-opener for him. It was not difficult to evaporate water into mist, but the difficult part was to turn the mist into a cloud and not disperse. Hibiscus opened her small mouth in surprise. This man was like the sea, hiding many unknown things that needed time to slowly uncover. Yu Qianqiu hid in the clouds and chuckled. Just now, using the smoke to create a diversion was really unnecessary. It was the white cloud that floated past him that reminded him. White clouds were formed by water. He could control the water art and he could also create clouds and rain. It was not difficult to make a cloud. Hence he created a pile of it. There was another advantage to the clouds that he created, and that was because it was formed by his water art. It was not something that could be dispersed by the wind. It was completely under his control. Yu Qianqiu opened his arms in the clouds and found a little of the feeling of being an immortal. Every tiny drop of water that formed this cloud seemed to be a part of his body. He knew every movement in every place like the back of his hand. In this sea of clouds he was the master. Nothing could escape his eyes. This feeling was too wonderful. Master was right. Indeed, the one who uses it well is invincible. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue in admiration. He knew that because of this unintentional action, he would have another method to deal with his enemies in the future. In the future, whether it was to investigate the enemy's situation or when escaping, turning water into mist would be a very good method of concealment. Haha. Yu Qianqiu's savage laughter came from the clouds. A bunch of trash, come at me. He was insulting them in public. The expressions of the 11 people changed. After waiting for a while, the leader scolded them for being cowards. Then he shouted to the others, "Let's work together and disperse this cloud. Let's see where he can hide then." The 11 people cautiously approached the edge of the cloud. They were probably still a little afraid that the lightning sword rain would suddenly emerge from the cloud. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and felt the movement in this space. After waiting for a while, they didn't discover any strange movements. The 11 people took out all kinds of weapons and madly stirred the cloud. However, no matter how many changes you stirred or how many thousands of strands you pulled out, it would slowly float back. It was impossible to disperse it. Someone was so angry that he released his flying sword into the cloud and shot it randomly. With someone taking the lead, everyone else took out their own weapons and madly attacked the cloud. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms in front of his chest. With a smile on his face, he stepped on the sword and didn't even bother to open his eyes. He leisurely dodged the attacks. This was his world. In this world, no matter how fast your flying sword was, where it came from, where it was going, and where it was moving, it would all appear clearly in his mind. As long as he dodged in advance, he would be able to evade it effortlessly. The 11 people madly attacked for a long time, but they didn't hear any reaction from inside. However, they didn't dare to go deep into the cloud. No one wanted to face the scene of thousands of swords. The leader shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, if you have the guts, come out and fight openly. You're a pig brain. You have the nerve to say that you want to fight openly when 11 of you are fighting me alone." Yu Qianqiu's sneer came from inside. Everyone listened to the sound and determined the location. They took out their mystic tools and attacked the place where the sound came from. As a result, their mystic tools collided with each other. A series of rumbling noises came from inside, shaking the cloud. After recalling their mystic tools, Yu Qianqiu sneered again, "A bunch of cowardly rats." The voice came from another location. The 11 of them attacked at the same time, but once again they missed. So Yu Qianqiu kept mocking him. The 11 people took turns to attack, but every time they missed, Yu Qianqiu's voice would change to another place and continue to sneer. After a while, someone suddenly shouted, "Everyone release your divine sense and search. Let's see where he can run to." Everyone cheered and did as they said. Yu Qianqiu secretly sneered after hearing that. He finally reacted. "I'm waiting." With a flick of his sleeves, hundreds of black shadows drilled into the sea of clouds. Once the 11 people's divine sense entered the sea of clouds, they couldn't help but think that it was a close shave. There was a black flying sword hanging in the air every few days. No wonder this guy hid inside and refused to come out. As everyone expected, he wanted to lure everyone in for a sneak attack. But the strange thing was, when everyone released their mystic tools to attack, why didn't they touch these flying swords? Everyone used their divine sense to check these black flying swords, but they didn't find anything special. Their divine sense continued to spread inside. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes to feel the movements of the 11 divine senses in the clouds. When they were deep inside, his eyes suddenly opened. The hundreds of flying swords instantly released the power of the black fire and shot towards the 11 divine senses. Actually, he understood the power of the black fire. Otherwise, it wouldn't have become the mystical fire that separated the yin and yang realms. Ever since he got it, he had been suppressing its use and never abused it. Because he knew that the trump card was to be used as a trump card. He couldn't always take it out to show off. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the miraculous effect of killing. Unless it was a critical moment, he would never take it out and use it openly. Occasionally he would use it for a while. In an instant, the sky was filled with cries of grief. That kind of unforgettable, soul-burning pain was unbearable for anyone. The sound was so miserable that even the people below had goosebumps when they heard it. The people who were watching the battle with their heads raised were shocked by the screams. They saw the cloud in the sky suddenly expand and engulf the 11 people in an instant. Soon, the screams disappeared without a trace. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They all knew that the 11 people were probably finished. What puzzled everyone was that those people were still fine outside the cloud, so why did they suddenly curl up into a ball and let out such miserable wails? What the hell happened? Yu Qianqiu stood quietly in the cloud. The 11 twisted corpses had been turned into beehives by the flying swords. The flying swords stabbed the corpses in front of him and cut off the storage pouches hanging from the waist of the 11 corpses. He raised his palm and hundreds of flying swords drilled out of the corpses and returned to his sleeve. Losing their support, the 11 corpses fell from the clouds with a whoosh. Yu Qianqiu watched them leave. He put his palms together and chanted, Amitabha, I really didn't want you to reveal my secret. So I killed you. Excellent, excellent. The people below saw the 11 figures fall quickly. Papa. They were embedded in the soft ground. There were already 14 corpses on the ground. The group of people looked at each other silently. Chapter 494. Although Furong had been cultivating for many years, it was the first time she saw someone kill someone. Moreover, it was Yu Qianqiu who shared the same bed with her. He killed one person in the imperial palace, and now he killed 14 people here. Especially those shrill screams just now, it made her hands and feet feel a little numb. Nongzhu noticed her abnormality. From her eyes, which were as pure as her own daughter's, she saw a frightened expression. She frowned slightly and thought to herself, I don't know where Yu Qianqiu kidnapped this girl from. It seems that she has never seen the world. How can he take her to walk in this kind of environment? No wonder that guy asked me to bring her back. Ouch. A long howl came from the 9th heaven, which attracted everyone's attention. They saw Yu Qianqiu jump out of the white clouds, riding on his flying sword and descending rapidly. As soon as he came out, the big cloud began to fluctuate. It was wrinkled by the wind, changed shape and slowly drifted away. The flying sword fell rapidly from the sky. When it was close to the ground, it suddenly drew an arc and threw its head up. Yu Qianqiu jumped up in the air, somersaulted a few times and landed steadily on the ground. The flying sword made a cyan arc and went into his sleeve with a swoosh. Yu Qianqiu strode to Wenrui's feet and picked up the 2 storage bags in front of everyone's eyes. Then he walked back to the field with the bags in his hand. He glanced around coldly, raised the storage bags in his hand, and shouted with unyielding fighting spirit, Who else is not convinced? Yu Qianqiu will fight with you anytime. The crowd moved and whispered to each other. Although they were indignant, no one dared to act rashly after witnessing the fate of more than 10 people. Especially the 47 people who retreated before, they secretly thought that they were lucky to escape. The original infant stage people in the crowd all looked at the crossing calamity stage people. No one answered. Yu Qianqiu raised the storage bags and shouted again, Where are the people who shouted before? Who else is not convinced? Yu Qianqiu will fight with you anytime. Young man, you've already killed so many people. Why are you still so overbearing? A voice rang out and a commotion broke out among the crowd in the south, opening up a path. An old man in a homespun long gown walked out. He first bowed to Nongzhu and Wenrui, and then walked to the opposite of Yu Qianqiu. He had a few strands of mustache and was neither fat nor thin. His complexion was rosy and his eyes were shining brightly. He had the appearance of a Taoist master. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly, You only see me being aggressive, but have you ever seen others being aggressive towards me? My original intention was to travel around the various countries without any other intentions. Who would have thought that Huazongming Yanji and the other deity-severing experts would force me into a corner, forcing me to say such a big lie? He pointed at the crowd and continued in a stern voice, In the imperial palace, more than 300 cultivators from various countries forced me to fight. Now that I've suffered a loss, it's me being aggressive. What kind of logic is this? The old man stroked his mustache and said indifferently, I don't care about what happened before, but you've earned enough fame. You'd better stop and leave this place. Go back to your Wuxia cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu looked him up and down, then laughed wildly, Who do you think you are? Yanji said he wouldn't let me leave alive. Do you dare to deny Yanji's words? Then I'd like to ask, what's your cultivation level? Can it be higher than Yanji's? If your cultivation level is higher than Yanji's and you can let me leave safely, I'll listen to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Nongzhu's voice sounded in his ears, Young man, restrain yourself. This person is called Chu Dingfang. You can't afford to offend him. He's a disciple of Hu Changshou, a deity-severing late-stage cultivator who is as famous as Yin Baikang. His cultivation level has already reached the late stage of tribulation. Damn it, why didn't you say so earlier? Don't you know that I hate people who take advantage of their seniority? I've already said it, how can I take it back? Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and looked at Nongzhu, who was smiling slyly. He cursed in his heart, This bastard is doing this on purpose. However, he was calm in his heart. He didn't plan to go back halfway. How could he be scared off by someone so easily? Moreover, his master's reputation was much higher than his master's. It wasn't like he couldn't beat him, so why should he be afraid of him? It didn't make sense. Chu Dingfang's expression was uncertain. His cultivation level was indeed not as high as Yanji's, but with his background, if he wanted to send Yu Qianqiu out, Yanji wouldn't dare to do anything to him. The key was that Yu Qianqiu had said this. If he made a decision now, it would be the same as going against Yanji. The power of Yanji, Huazongming, and the others was not small. When the time came, his master would probably punish him in order to save Yanji's face. He would take it as an explanation to Yanji. Chu Dingfang immediately became angry from embarrassment. He changed the topic and said, I heard that you claim to be the most powerful cultivator below the soul formation stage? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the 14 bodies on the ground. He said proudly, for now that is the truth. I heard that any cultivator below the soul formation stage can fight with you if he can take out 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones? Chu Dingfang's tone was aggressive. Yu Qianqiu sneered and didn't say anything. He took a storage bag with 11,000,000 top-grade spirit stones and threw another one to Wenrui. He was telling Wenrui to do whatever he wanted with his actions. Chu Dingfang took out a storage bag with cold eyes and threw it to Wenrui without turning his head. Nongzhu looked at the storage bag on the ground and calculated. This guy had killed 15 people, which was equivalent to 15,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. If this job was done well, even a spirit stone mine with a high output would not be able to mine so many spirit stones in a year, right? Nongzhu looked at the storage bag on Chu Dingfang's waist and her eyes lit up. If this guy could get that storage bag, he would make a fortune today. You asked for it. Don't blame anyone else. Chu Dingfang said indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Nongzhu's pupils shrank and her heart skipped a beat. There was a huge difference between the early stage and the late stage of the tribulation stage. Teleportation. Yu Qianqiu was greatly alarmed, but he reacted quickly. At the same time that the other party disappeared, he leaped up without a care for anything else. Ah! With a roar, he opened his arms and a fierce blue fire burst out at a speed that could devour everything. It was to defend against the attack from an unknown direction. The exploding blue fire made people around exclaim. It was the first time for them to see someone who could contain so many flames in his body. Moreover, they were blue flames. The majestic and unparalleled heat waves rushed around in an instant. Those with low cultivation could not resist it at all and fled in panic. Nongzhu did not say anything. She pointed out a light ball and wrapped hibiscus in it. She couldn't let Yu Qianqiu be distracted now. Wenrui also released a light ball to protect Wenbai. Just as Yu Qianqiu leaped into the air, Chu Dingfang suddenly appeared just a step away from where he had been standing. She waved her palm and wanted to slap him, but she realized that she had hit nothing but air. Chu Dingfang looked up and suddenly saw a wave of hot and crazy blue flame pressing down on her face. She was shocked. The protective upstanding chi rushed out quickly. However, the terrible temperature that came with it kept pressing through the transparent protective upstanding chi, wave after wave higher than the previous one. Chu Dingfang was shocked. Now it was not a question of whether to fight back or not, but to get out of this frighteningly hot sea of fire first. He had never seen a flame that he could not resist for a while with his cultivation. The spherical protective upstanding chi wrapped around him and quickly slid away from the ground, leaving a deep ditch on the spot. As soon as he got out of the raging blue flame sea, he heard a roar coming from the monstrous flames. "Watch my blade." Chu Dingfang abruptly turned her head and saw Yu Qianqiu chasing out of the raging flames on a green flying sword. He was holding a large black saber in both hands, and his face was full of anger. He jumped up from the flying sword like a god of death and slashed at Chu Dingfang's protective aura. So fierce. Everyone was deeply shocked by the incomparable scene of Yu Qianqiu rushing out of the sea of fire. Two words emerged in their minds: fierce and unafraid of death. Furong's eyes were full of shock. This scene was too shocking for someone like her, who was psychologically close to a weak woman. Wenbai, who had been dissatisfied with Yu Qianqiu deceiving him at this moment, had no resentment at all. Just the momentum of his appearance was undeniable. Generally, even a Yuanying late-stage cultivator could only run away when he saw a Yuanying late-stage cultivator. But this guy actually turned around and chased after a Yuanying late-stage cultivator with a broadsword. He rushed up and slashed at them. Nongzhu, on the other hand, was beaming with joy. She kept clicking her tongue. Hiss. The big black broadsword slashed down, and the protective upstanding chi was like a thin piece of paper. Chu Dingfang was scared out of his wits. The blade almost brushed past the tip of his nose. This broadsword was a little too long. He thought that his protective upstanding chi could completely block this broadsword, and he could take Yu Qianzhou's life with a backhand. He was just waiting for Yu Qianzhou to pounce on him. Who knew that this would be the result? The most terrifying thing was that he was clearly burning just now, but when the broadsword broke through, he immediately felt like he was thrown into an ice cave. There was also the heart-palpitating aura that came head-on, as if he had instantly arrived at hell on earth. Little did he know that Yu Qianzhou was also very regretful. If he had been a little more courageous just now and pounced forward a little more, he might have been able to chop this old bastard alive with this broadsword. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. But it still gave him courage, and he waved his broadsword and roared, "Meeting on a narrow path, the brave one wins." His voice was loud enough to shake the surroundings, as if he was afraid that people did not know how brave he was. Chu Dingfang was shocked for a moment, and frantically dodged, not knowing how to quickly teleport away. Yu Qianzhou chased after him, raising his broadsword with both hands and slashing wildly. That unstoppable spirit caused Chu Dingfang to be in danger again and again. In fact, Chu Dingfang was confused by the aura on the broadsword, and could not react for a moment. Behind Yu Qianzhou, there was a surging green sea of fire chasing after him. In the sea of fire, there were also some green, faintly discernible flying swords flashing in and out. In addition, Yu Qianzhou was holding a 2-meter-long big black broadsword that was taller than him, chasing after Chu Dingfang and slashing wildly. The fighting scene was enough to make everyone dumbfounded. Damn it, you asked for it. Yu Qianzhou himself did not know why Chu Dingfang was so easy to bully now, so he ignored it for the time being. Relying on the fierceness of the fire, the size of the broadsword, and the boldness, he raised his broadsword and chased after and slashed wildly. Chapter 495. The cyan light illuminated the surroundings, rendering the surroundings cyan. Yu Qianzhou wielded his broadsword like a windmill, while Chu Dingfang struggled to move forward. Those who were clamoring in the imperial palace felt a chill down their spines in the face of the rolling heat wave. Fortunately, they did not act rashly. It seemed that even if more than 300 people attacked Yu Qianzhou at the same time, they would not be able to get close to him. How dare they provoke him? Thinking about it, Ding Wei died unjustly. He fought with an opponent he could not defeat, but he died without leaving a corpse. When Rui looked at the brilliant cyan flame and said to Nongzhu, "Sir, I heard that Yu Qianzhou has a famous incantation in the cultivation world of Wuxia called Star Flame Incantation. Is it this incantation?" Nongzhu chuckled and replied, Probably. Furong and Wen Bai, who were standing aside, stared at her intently. The surrounding spectators remained silent. 2 old men in the crowd frowned deeply. One of them was dressed in black and the other in purple. After exchanging glances, the black-robed old man transmitted his voice. "Brother Yu, did you notice? Chu Dingfang seems to be a little off." "Yes, he seems to be in a trance." The purple-robed elder nodded and replied, "He seems to be bewitched by something. Let me have a try." The black-robed elder gathered his chi and shouted to Chu Dingfang with his sound-transmitting stick, "Brother Chu, wake up." Chu Dingfang, whose dodging speed was getting slower and slower, felt his eardrums buzzing. His whole body shook and his eyes flashed. Then he disappeared from the gap between the shadows of the broadswords. Nongzhu, who was watching the battle, narrowed his eyes and quickly glanced at the crowd. From Chu Dingfang's change, he knew that someone had secretly helped him. When Rui also frowned and looked around. In the cultivation world there were rules in a duel. As long as one did not admit defeat or quit, others could not intervene. Such behavior was the most abominable. Once the rules were broken, someone had to uphold them. Everything was like this. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. Yu Qianzhou naturally sensed that something was amiss. He was slightly startled, and the hundreds of flying swords behind him rushed forward to cover their retreat. He quickly jumped onto a flying sword and dove back into the sea of fire. An angry scolding came from the sea of green flames. "Shut your grandma's mouth." Which son of AB*TCH interfered in the dark? "Stand out if you have the guts." Just as he was about to succeed, someone suddenly interfered and ruined his plans. It would be strange if he wasn't angry. The purple-robed old man in the crowd frowned and said via voice transmission, "Brother Guan, aren't you going a little too far by breaking the rules?" The black-robed old man replied calmly, Rules depend on who you're talking to. This kid is from the Chinese cultivation world, so he's our enemy. There's no need to talk about rules with him. Everyone should be punished. The onlookers also had some clues. With Yu Qianshou's voice, everyone immediately understood that someone had interfered in the dark. Everyone was shaking their heads and searching. At least one thing was certain. The person who could transmit the voice must have cultivation above the crossing calamity stage. Therefore, everyone's eyes fell on the faces of the cultivators at the crossing calamity stage. However, transmission was elusive. It was difficult to find evidence except for the person involved. If the person involved didn't admit it, others couldn't do anything even if they guessed who it was. After all, there was no solid evidence. Nongzhu and Wenrui looked around. They looked at each other and shook their heads. There was nothing they could do. Suddenly, the two of them raised their heads and looked up at the sky. Their reaction attracted everyone's attention. They saw Chu Dingfang standing still in the air. Apparently, he was adjusting his body. Maybe his body was affected by something just now. After a long time, he slowly descended. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag. It flew around him for a few rounds and landed in his hand. It was a weapon that looked like a sword or a saber. It seemed like they were going to make a big move. The unusual atmosphere caused Yu Qianshou to pop his head out of the sea of flames to look. When he discovered Chu Dingfang above him, he was just about to shrink back into the sea of flames when his gaze landed on Chu Dingfang's weapon. Ghost blade? In this moment of delay, Chu Dingfang's eyes narrowed and she immediately discovered him. He dashed toward Meng Qi. He shook the saber in his hand and a huge shadow dozens of meters long appeared. The huge saber shadow slashed down at the sea of fire. Damn. Yu Qianshou was slightly shocked. He quickly dove into the sea of fire to avoid it. The saber energy that came slashing down from the air stirred up a powerful gust of wind as it charged forward. With a loud boom, the sea of green flames that covered an area of several hundred square meters was struck to the bottom with one slash. Earth and rocks flew everywhere. The sea of fire that had been split into two was pushed to the sides by the strong wind. Why is the sky clear? Yu Qianshou, who was hiding in the sea of fire, immediately revealed himself. At this moment, he was standing on the flying sword with a dumbfounded expression. He was holding a large saber as he stood there like a little wife who had been stripped naked and had suffered all kinds of grievances. There was a long and unforgettable trench on the ground. When the saber energy disappeared, Yu Qianshou snapped out of his daze. He looked up and pointed his saber at Meng Qi. He shouted angrily, "Kill!" The sea of green fire that had been split into two instantly turned into two green fire dragons. They coiled in the air and pounced at Chu Dingfang with incomparable brilliance. Chu Dingfang smiled coldly. He quickly rose 100 meters into the air. He shook the saber in his hand and a huge energy shadow appeared again. He moved his wrist quickly. In an instant he stirred up a strong wind. The two fire dragons that were pouncing at him immediately lost their momentum. They spun rapidly in the strong wind and merged into a pillar of fire in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianshou immediately sensed that blue fire was no longer under his control, so he gave up on resisting the powerful wind. His cultivation base was no match for blue fire's. Forcibly resisting it would only result in him getting injured. Watch how I extinguish this pile of demonic fire of yours. Chu Dingfang laughed coldly in the air. Then he flew straight up into the sky. The huge saber energy in his hand moved continuously and formed a strong suction force. He pulled the pillar of fire into the sky. Based on his actions, it seemed like he wanted to draw the green fire into the sky and then disperse it in the air. He did not want to give Yu Qianshou a chance to retract it. A toad yawning. How arrogant. Yu Qianshou spat. Although he could not fight his opponent head-on with his cultivation base, his opponent's cultivation base was not strong enough to seal everything. His ability to summon the fire element was not to be trifled with. Even if he could not control it, he could still retract it. He swung his saber diagonally and steadied himself on the flying sword. He raised his palm and shouted, "Come back." A line of fire flowed out from the bottom of the rising fire dragon. The terminal was connected to Yu Qianshou's palm. The moment the green fire touched his palm, it retracted even faster. Chu Dingfang was still flying up. In the end, he drew a green line of fire between the sky and the earth. Fortunately, it was not nighttime. Otherwise, even the commoners of Deyang City would be able to see it. Chu Dingfang looked a little strange. It was impossible for him to lose to a nascent soul cultivator with his cultivation base at the end of the tribulation passing stage. The huge saber energy turned into a shadow. Even the people on the ground a few hundred meters below reacted. Their clothes and hair were all sucked up. They had to circulate their energy to suppress it. However, this place was formed by the mountain peak that Yin Baikong had destroyed. The new layer of soil on the surface was soft. Immediately, the yellow soil flew up into the air, along with the withered grass and rotten branches of the surrounding mountains. The place immediately turned into a yellow haze. It covered the sky and the earth, making it impossible to see anything. Although the commotion was not small, it could not stop the green fire from flowing out of the eye of the storm. Like an overturned hourglass, it poured down in torrents. Yu Qianqiu extinguished the last wisp of azure flame. He couldn't see where the person above it was. He flung his sleeve and a steady stream of azure light flashed out. Thousands of flying swords danced in the air. With a point of his finger, the thousands of flying swords exploded and shot into the sky. He rode his sword to the side and flew into the sky from the dusky haze. Chu Dingfang made her last effort, but her words still became a joke. She couldn't help but be angry out of shame. He put away his saber and looked down. It was a yellow haze. He could not see what was below him from the sky. He reckoned that the people below him could not see what was above him. Just as he was about to rush down, he heard an urgent whistling sound. Green lights flashed everywhere in the yellow haze. A group of flying swords randomly shot towards him without a target. The saber energy in his hand rose again. With a few casual swings, he knocked away dozens of flying swords that were shooting towards him. However, it was this collision that immediately disturbed the other flying swords. The thousands of flying swords seemed to have gone berserk. They all turned and shot towards him in a frenzy. Chu Dingfang snorted coldly and disdainfully. His target was Yu Qianqiu. He teleported and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on the ground. He looked around but did not see Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that many people were looking up at the sky, he immediately understood that the fellow had gone up. With a swoosh, he shot up into the sky again. When he was in the sky, he realized that he had created a big problem for himself. It was difficult to see people clearly in the yellow haze. He had to be on guard against that fellow's sneak attacks. Chu Dingfang suddenly realized that something was wrong. The earthy smell was getting lighter. The yellow haze was getting wider and seemed to be getting thicker. The scene of the 11 people fighting flashed in his mind. He was shocked and knew that this was not good. He quickly swept his divine sense around, searching for Yu Qianqiu's position. Suddenly he found a big black saber floating in the haze. It seemed to be the saber that Yu Qianqiu used. Chu Dingfang's heart was beating wildly. The power of this saber was too strong. It broke through his aura shield like a paper knife. It was as easy as blowing off dust. This was in the hands of that fellow. If it fell into his hands, with his cultivation, he was afraid that among the cultivators in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, no one would be a match for him. Although he knew that it might be a trap, he could not help but release his divine sense to investigate. The key was that the temptation of this saber was too great. He thought, if I don't go over, what can he do to me? His divine sense touched the body of the saber. Before it went deep, he felt a strange and majestic aura. It contained an unknown and mysterious power. Just by touching it with his divine sense, he felt a lingering fear in his heart. Chapter 496. The spectators below also noticed something was wrong from the gradually fading yellow dust. There was another cloud in the sky, motionless. The cloud was exactly the same as the previous battle, and it immediately gave everyone a strange feeling. Could Chu Dingfang be inside? The crowd could not help but look at each other. Especially the black-robed elder and the purple-robed elder, they already felt something was wrong. However, the cloud was still peaceful and quiet, without any reaction. Would that guy play the same trick again? Nongzhu pinched her chin and thought. Yu Qianqiu hid in a corner of the cloud, sensing the movement inside. Seeing that Chu Dingfang had fallen into his trap, he sneered. In order to prevent the other party from escaping after discovering something was wrong, he deliberately offered the tempting big black saber, which made the other party salivate. Noticing that Chu Dingfang's divine awareness had touched the big black saber, he slowly stretched out his clenched fist and suddenly opened it. Chu Dingfang's divine awareness sensed the majestic power in the big black saber, hesitating whether to take it or not, but he was afraid of falling into a trap. After all, it was not so easy. After thinking about it, he decided not to rush. After he killed that guy, the saber would still be his. However, just when his divine awareness was about to leave the big black saber and continue to search for Yu Qianqiu, there was a sudden bang. The big black saber exploded in an instant. exploding into a raging black flame, instantly drowning his divine awareness in a black sea of fire. The pain that followed was like being cut by thousands of knives, appearing in every corner of his body in an instant. It was like countless sharp knives were cutting every piece of his skin and drilling into every bone. There seemed to be countless worms wriggling in his head, nibbling away at them. It was like his whole body was suffering in a fire, as if it was going to burn him alive. The pain was suffocating, but he was struggling in the endless sea of bitterness, never able to find the other side, and had to suffer like this. The heart-wrenching pain that he was unable to extricate himself from numbness occupied every single one of his nerves. The pain seeped into his bones and soul. Chu Dingfang hugged her head with her hands and curled into a ball. Her face was twisted to the extreme. She tore off her beard and hair with her hands and scratched her face with her nails. She didn't seem to know who she was and was in a state worse than death. F***ck me. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He did not expect the response to be so extraordinary. This guy's cultivation level was too high. He was afraid that ordinary methods would not work on him, so he purposely blew up the black knife condensed by the black fire and enlarged the fire to burn his mother's divine sense. He did not expect that it would burn a little too much. He appeared on his sword and charged over. With a wave of his hand, he collected the black flames cleanly. Chu Dingfang could no longer stay in the air. Her body swayed and fell down from the clouds. Yu Qianqiu quickly rushed over and grabbed the old man's storage pouch, lifting him up. The old man's twisted and struggling appearance was truly unbearable to look at. The old man couldn't even scream and could only howl. He raised one hand and a green flame appeared. He wanted to give him a quick death. However, after a slight pause, the green flame left a little green glow on her fingertips and cut the rope on the storage bag. Chu Dingfang fell down. I'll use you to test my absorbing star's great skill. Yu Qianqiu swung his palm at the falling person. White smoke rose from Chu Dingfang's body, and he instantly shriveled up like a skeleton. He floated down from the clouds. The people below had been paying attention to the sky above. When the explosion sounded, the clouds above their heads instantly darkened. No one knew what was going on. Nongzhu was the only one who thought of the word black fire. Then came a terrifying scream. The scream was even worse than the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. It was hard to imagine that it came from a human. Judging from the tone, it should be Chu Dingfang's voice. Another person followed in his footsteps, and it was an expert at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Everyone looked at each other, wondering what was wrong with the clouds. Whoosh! Chu Dingfang's katana was the first to fall. It directly stabbed into the ground, proving that the unfortunate person they had guessed was right. Then everyone saw a body fall. The strange thing was that the speed of the body's fall was not that fast and it seemed to be floating. Pow! Chu Dingfang, who was curled up, squatted steadily on the soft ground. Not dead? Everyone was stunned. Suddenly there was a crisp hua sound. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Dingfang was instantly torn into pieces after a short pause. Her entire body shattered into a pile and collapsed on the ground. His whole body collapsed into pieces and powder. Hiss! Many people in the crowd gasped in disbelief. What kind of death was this? In fact, the moment Chu Dingfang's body broke into pieces, the person who was facing him saw the unforgettable scene. His face was dry and shriveled and he was just skin and bones. Even his eyeballs had dried up to the size of 2 soybeans, hanging outside his eye sockets. The inside of his eye sockets were dark. The skin and flesh on his face shrunk together, and his white teeth had also decayed into a withered yellow color. It was as if Chu Dingfang had lived for thousands of years, and he was a dried corpse from thousands of years in the future. If not for the movement above and the robe on his body, who would believe that he was Chu Dingfang? Unfortunately, the direction he was facing was where hibiscus was. Furong retched and almost threw up. Fortunately, the dried corpse collapsed in the blink of an eye. Otherwise, Furong would have vomited if she had looked at it for a while longer. When Rui was also shocked. This kind of death was too strange. Nongzhu's pupils suddenly shrank. She immediately thought of the scene of Yu Qianqiu taking away the life of a flower with one palm strike that night. It had also withered in an instant. Although one was a flower and the other was a human, there was no doubt that both of them had the same experience. This guy finally used this skill on a human. Nongzhu remembered that Yu Qianqiu wanted to try this skill on her that night. If she had agreed at that time but could not resist it, she would have ended up like the ugly rotten corpse in front of her. She shuddered at the thought that she might become like this. The more she thought about it, the more scared she became. She could not help but curse in her heart. Bastard, he doesn't even know the importance of something he has just learned, and he wants to use me to practice. I don't know what old Bai taught him. Of all the things he could have taught me, why did he teach me such a scary thing? Nongju decided on the spot that she would leave this place as soon as this thing was over. She could not help but talk back to that guy. If she made him angry one day, he would do the same to her. What if she could not resist it? When Rui took a deep breath, turned his head and asked, "Mister, I've never seen or heard of the magic arts used by Yu Qianqiu. Can you tell me where he came from?" In his impression, Mr. Nongju had the widest circle of friends in the world. Since he was tolerant of Yu Qianqiu and everything, he must know his background. Nongju paused and shook her head slightly. She replied, "You'd better not know. Anyway, his background is very powerful. Your Wen family can't afford to offend him." "Is he Bai Changchun's disciple?" Wen Rui was surprised. The old ancestor of the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng, was the second master in the world, second only to Bai Changchun. If the Wen family couldn't afford to offend him, who else could it be except Bai Changchun? Nongju was stunned. He had guessed it correctly. But what Wen Rui said next made her even more stunned. Wen Rui shook his head and denied himself. "I don't think so. I've seen Bai Changchun's skills. Even if it's unpredictable and unconstrained, it's completely dignified and arrogant. It's not similar to Yu Qianqiu's skills at all. A master and disciple wouldn't be like this. And Yu Qianqiu's skill is full of evil qi. It's not like he's Bai Changchun's disciple." Nongju was speechless. "How do you know it's not Bai Changchun who taught him?" "I heard the skill from Bai Changchun and witnessed the process of understanding it. In short, if your Wen family can help him in the future, try your best to help him. It won't do any harm to your family." Nongju gave an ambiguous answer. She didn't want to make another enemy for Yu Qianqiu in the world. "Thank you for reminding me, sir." Wen Rui nodded slightly and sighed. It's said that all the skills in the world originate from Wuxia. Yu Qianqiu is from Wuxia and his skills are really magical. It seems that it's a good thing that our Wen family didn't intervene in the fight between the two sides. The vast Wuxia is really full of hidden talents. It's not as simple as it looks. I'm afraid that things won't go so smoothly for the other countries. Nongju glanced at him and was speechless. She thought, "You're really good at making connections." Howl. A clear roar resounded from the 9 heavens, as if it was announcing its victory. Yu Qianqiu rode his sword and flew straight down. After landing, he glanced at Chu Dingfang's remains and was quite satisfied with the power of his water conjuration. This was the first time he killed a cultivator in the last phase of the heavens test. It was really memorable. Who else is not convinced? This short sentence revealed an intense self-confidence. Yu Qianqiu coldly surveyed his surroundings, exuding a disdainful aura. He felt that he hadn't been like this for a long time. He had been a gangster for a long time. The feeling of being a gang leader that he had forgotten for a long time had returned. Nongju smiled bitterly. "You killed Bing Qingzi's disciple, Yin Baikang's disciple, and now you killed Hu Changshuo's disciple. You've offended all of them. Among the top 10 cultivators in the last phase of the spirit-severing realm, you've already offended 3 of them. Good luck." The black-robed elder in the crowd transmitted his voice to the purple-robed elder beside him. "Brother Yu, this kid's cultivation is still low, but he has already shown his outstanding talent. He will definitely become a disaster in the future. Let's attack together and take this opportunity to get rid of this kid." The purple-robed elder frowned and replied, "Brother Guan, you and I are 2 cultivators in the last phase of the heavens test against a nascent soul cultivator. Won't we be a joke in front of so many people?" "That's not the way to put it." The black-robed elder said in a deep voice, "A kid from Wuxia challenged the cultivators of the other countries. If we let him leave alive and none of us can stop him, that would be the biggest joke in the world. What's more, he said it himself. It doesn't matter if we all attack together. It's not against the rules if it's just us." Chapter 497. "Brother Guan, didn't you notice that this kid's magic art is a bit strange? Do you really think we can kill him?" The purple-robed elder voiced out his concern. The black-robed elder laughed and said, "Brother Yu, you worry too much. Did you notice that this kid's secret lies in the mist? As long as we don't go into the mist, he can't do anything to us. Or rather, kill him before he can release the cloud and mist. If we fight together, I don't think that kid will have the chance to release the mist. Brother Yu, after we kill that kid, we can split the things in the storage pouch, including the 2 sabers. What do you think?" The purple-robed elder was hesitant at first, but when he heard about the two sabers he frowned and nodded slightly. Maybe we can try. Yu Qianqiu thought that the battle just now was enough to shock this group of people. Seeing that no one answered him, he sneered and was about to pick up the storage pouch. Unexpectedly, before he could reach Wenrui, two storage pouches flew through the air and smashed in front of him. Looking back, an old man in a black robe and an old man in a purple robe appeared out of nowhere. The former sneered and said, "You don't need to pick up the things, we will pick them up for you later." His tone was full of confidence. The onlookers were in an uproar again. When they saw that Yu Qianqiu could kill Chu Dingfang, who was in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test, they were really shocked. They didn't expect that an original infant stage cultivator could do this. They were already prepared to lose face. The sudden appearance of the two people gave everyone hope. Many people knew them, and the appearance of these two cultivators in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test surprised everyone. Originally, they thought that people in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test would care about their reputation, so it was impossible for more than two people to fight a cultivator in the original infant stage at the same time. However, a cultivator in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test might not be able to defeat Yu Qianqiu. Just when they were about to accept this unacceptable fact, something unexpected happened. At this moment, no one dared to look down on the behavior of these two people, because it concerned everyone's reputation. However, some people didn't like it. Nongzhu snorted coldly and said to Wenrui, "Some people are really shameless." Wenrui smiled but did not say anything. Yu Qianqiu was the one who boasted. Since he dared to say it, he must have the courage to face reality. He could not blame others. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and looked at the two of them. Since they dared to say such words at this time, they must be cultivators at the end of the tribulation stage. As expected, Nongzhu's voice rang in his ears, "Don't be careless." The one in black is Guan Zhangkai, the disciple of Yin Baikong's eldest disciple, Sikongju. The one in purple is Yu Landu, the disciple of Shangguan Taiping, a middle-stage deity transformation cultivator from the Purple Thistle Kingdom. Both of them are at the late stage of the crossing tribulation. "Have the two of you decided to come at me together?" Yu Qianqiu asked sarcastically. Yu Landu's expression was slightly awkward. On the contrary, Guan Zhangkai's expression was calm as he sneered, "If you are afraid, it is not too late. Kneel and beg for mercy. Leave behind the things in your storage pouch and I will spare your life. If you want the things, you have to have the ability to take them." As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, he immediately threw out a flying sword and quickly flew into the sky. These two clearly knew that he had some tricks up his sleeves. Since they still dared to come at him, they must have the confidence to deal with him. He did not dare to underestimate them now. Guan Zhangkai sneered. A flying sword flashed out of his storage pouch and directly chased after Yu Qianqiu in the sky. He himself teleported and disappeared. Without any hesitation, Yu Lan soared into the sky at an extremely fast speed with a whoosh sound. Everyone's gaze was attracted to them. Farong had also roughly guessed the cultivation of these two. She tightly shut her mouth and did not say a word. She was silently worried. She was afraid that if she made a sound, it would affect Yu Qianqiu. Hearing the whistling sound coming from below, Yu Qianqiu glanced at it. He rode his sword and dodged horizontally, brushing past the flying sword. A strong gust of wind almost blew him off his sword. This was the result of a huge difference in cultivation. Just as he dodged the attack with lingering fear, he realized that in the direction he was dodging, the black-robed Guan Zhangkai had been waiting for a long time in front of him. He sneered and casually snatched the flying sword that was flying towards him. He shook out a huge sword aura and slashed down. *CK. Yu Qianqiu was startled and quickly dodged again. The transparent sword aura brushed past him again. But no matter which direction he dodged, Guan Zhangkai was able to block in front of him in time. He skillfully and easily chased after him with his sword. Every time he was frightened and narrowly dodged. In the eyes of others, Guan Zhangkai was like a cat toying with a mouse. His opponent didn't even give him a chance to release the fog. He could only release a little for a short period of time, but it didn't have any effect. Without saying anything further, green light flashed on his two sleeves. Instantly, a sky full of flying swords circled around him to protect him. At the same time, over 100 swords attacked Guan Zhangkai in a roundabout way, hoping to buy him some time to breathe. And indeed it had some effect. Guan Zhangkai was somewhat apprehensive as he swung his sword like he was swatting flies. After all, 3 nascent soul stage cultivators had been mysteriously killed after being surrounded by these green flying swords. Over 100 flying swords were constantly knocked away, but they also continued to entangle him. They were just like flies. Whoosh! Suddenly, another whistling sound came from below. When he glanced over, he was startled again. It was Yulan who saw him start to counterattack. She immediately raised her palms and pushed out a basin-sized ball of light that shot towards him. *CK. Kamehameha Chencho. Yu Chencho's eyes widened and he hurriedly rode his sword to dodge. Although he managed to dodge, the flying swords behind him that he didn't dodge in time were damaged. Bang! Amidst a violent explosion, the densely packed flying swords that were circling in the air were blown into pieces and scattered in all directions. The powerful shockwave was like a heavy hammer that fiercely smashed into his back. The shockwave directly knocked him off the flying sword he was standing on. Yu Chencho felt his vision turn black. He felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. In just a few moments he was already injured. This was the result of a huge difference in cultivation. His opponent had come prepared. With his nascent soul stage cultivation, he was simply no match for his opponent. He was easily dealt with. Hibiscus, who was below, covered her mouth with her hand and tears instantly flowed out. Nongju's expression was grim, but she still sent a voice transmission to Hibiscus, comforting her. "Girl, don't worry. This kid won't die so easily." When Rue's expression was also somewhat grave. If this Yu Chencho really did have a powerful background, and if he were to attract an extraordinary person, then this matter would become even more serious. The cultivators from the various countries who were watching the battle erupted in cheers. They had finally taught this arrogant fellow a lesson. In a moment of absent-mindedness, the flying swords immediately lost control and fell one after another. Guan Zhongkai got rid of the fly's harassment. His expression darkened and the sword in his hand floated up. He pushed it out with his palm and it shot towards the falling Yu Chencho like a bolt of lightning. Yulan Do teleported to the other side and pushed out another ball of light. Together with Guan Zhongkai's flying swords, they launched a pincer attack. From the looks of it, the two of them wanted to finish the battle in one go. Yu Chencho spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt relieved and his vision became clear again. He quickly glanced at them and a burst of uncontrollable anger burst out. "How dare you hit me? Ah!" Yu Chencho looked up to the sky and roared. All the green fire elements stored in his body burst out in an instant. Not a single bit was left. Surging green flames spewed out like an explosion. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Do's pupils shrank rapidly. The flames hadn't arrived yet, but the unparalleled heat had arrived first. The two of them suddenly felt like they had poked a hornet's nest. Without saying a word, they quickly turned around and displayed the fastest flying speed in their lives. However, they still felt that it wasn't enough. They teleported again and again, exhausting a lot of their cultivation to escape. Previously, Chu Dingfang couldn't even withstand the high temperature of the green flames when he hid inside his protective aura and had to escape. The two of them had about the same cultivation as him. They could tell at a glance that it was powerful. There was no need to try and escape. At first, the two of them thought that the green flames hidden in Yu Chencho's body were the same ones that he had released earlier. It wouldn't be difficult to avoid them. Who knew that there were so many of them? Was he still human? How could a human hide so many flames? The two of them even had the urge to curse. How did they meet such a monster? They were still fighting to their heart's content earlier and wanted to kill that brat. How did they end up being forced to escape in the blink of an eye? If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have joined in the fun. When the ball of light released by Yulan was still 100 meters away from Yu Chencho, it was directly roasted by the green flames and exploded with a loud explosion. However, it only set off a ripple in the sea of flames. It didn't affect Yu Chencho at all. Needless to say, the flying swords released by Guan Zhongkai were melted into liquid in the sea of flames. Guan Zhongkai, who had a connection with the flying swords, felt his heart ache. That flying sword was a high-grade transcendent artifact given to him by his master. The thousands of green flying swords that were originally scattered flew up into the sky and merged into the sea of flames. The terrifying sea of flames that filled the sky swelled up again. After quickly escaping for several kilometers, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan finally got rid of the pursuit of the green flames. The two of them stood on opposite ends of the sea of flames. They didn't look at each other, but their mood was completely the same. The two of them almost collapsed from exhaustion. With their cultivation, they could only teleport 500 or 600 meters at most. Teleportation consumed too much of their cultivation. It was not a technique that could be used multiple times. They had used teleportation more than 10 times. How could they bear it? It was really too tiring. When the two of them turned around to look, Their intestines almost turned green with regret. They could have escaped to the sky or to the ground, but this fire chased them horizontally. However, they didn't dare to be sure. What if the other party could control the flames to chase them? This was very possible. An unforgettable scene appeared in the sky. Green flames. Green flames filled the sky, covering the sun. The sky within a radius of several kilometers was completely covered by the green flames. The dazzling green light illuminated the sky. Even Deyang City, which was several kilometers away, was alarmed. Some of the commoners climbed onto the roofs of tall buildings. Many of them squeezed out of the city to see the spectacle in the distant sky. Below the green flames, among the spectators, those with low cultivation could no longer bear it. Although the green flames above and below were separated by more than 100 meters, if they continued to roast like this, how could they bear it? Chapter 498. However, the first to suffer were the remote mountains and forests around them. How could they withstand the power of the blue fire? Although they did not come into direct contact with the fire, it did not take long for them to catch fire. The vegetation in the deep mountains and forests was lush, and the fire was also monstrous. The birds could not fly and the beasts could not escape from the disaster. They were swallowed by the merciless fire. The blue fire in the sky was dazzling, and the red fire on the ground was emitting thick black smoke. The blue fire in the sky was dazzling, and the red fire on the ground was emitting thick black smoke. The place where the battle was being watched became a cage in the sea of fire. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du, who were panting at the two ends of the sea of fire, were shocked by the scene in the sky and on the ground. How did this happen? The two did not know that the place where the battle was being watched was even more chaotic. There were more than 3,000 people. People were going to die. If they wanted to escape, only a few people with high cultivation were confident that they could break out of this endless sea of fire. Of course, they had to escape from the ordinary fire that was close to the ground. However, most of the people who came to watch the fun had not reached the crossing calamity stage. Those who were below the crossing calamity stage, including those who were in the late nascent soul stage, were not confident that they could escape from this mountain of fire that stretched for dozens of miles. It was even more impossible to escape from the sky, because they were blocked by the blue fire. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the blue flame, slightly straightened out the chaotic aura in his chest. He stood on a black flying sword with a calm face. He floated out of the blue flame sea and looked around. He didn't see the two fellows who had injured him. He immediately activated his true essence and shouted, "Guan Zhongkai Yulan Du, get out here you too." His voice shook the surroundings and the people below could hear it more clearly. When it fell into Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du's ears, it was almost inaudible. However, with their cultivation they could still hear what it was. Their expressions twitched, and they looked at the vast sea of fire at the same time. They secretly cursed, "Only a ghost would go. There is no way to fight this fight. With our cultivation we are not afraid of you, but we are afraid of this blue sea of fire. What if you turn this sea of fire into dumplings after we run over? Can we still run out of this place?" The two of them knew that they didn't have the ability to teleport a dozen more times. They really couldn't move anymore. "Guan Zhongkai Yulan Du, you two shameless fellows, come out quickly, I'll fight you for 300 rounds. Guan Zhongkai Yulan Du, you two shameless scum, you two cowards, come out if you have the guts and I'll spare your lives. Yulan City, Guan Zhongkai, your grandfather is here, hurry up and show yourself." Yu Qianqiu stood above the sea of fire and cursed non-stop. Although the two of them were extremely angry, they still felt that their lives were more important. They could only pretend that they didn't hear anything. However, if this matter were to spread out, he would definitely lose face. Many people couldn't stand it anymore. They gathered around Nongzhu and Wenrui to ask for help. "Mr. Nongzhu, Senior Wenrui, please save us. Seniors, please save me. Seniors, please ask Yu Qianqiu to stop. Oh no, someone has already fainted." A group of people surrounded them and begged. Some cultivators in the level of foundation establishment couldn't resist anymore, and dozens of them fainted. Nongzhu was both angry and amused. Why did they come here if they didn't have the ability? Didn't you cheer for Yu Qianqiu when he was injured? What? Are you scared now? Nongzhu raised her head and pouted to the sky. She said angrily, "Since you can't wait to kill him, why don't you just go up and kill him together? Then you'll be saved. Why do you need to beg me?" Nongzhu's words reminded Furong. Furong looked at these people with resentment. These people cheered for Yu Qianqiu when he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. It would be better if they were all dead now. This was probably the first time in her life that this pure and kind-hearted woman had cursed with such resentment. When Rui didn't say anything. Since he knew that Yu Qianqiu had a powerful background, he had decided to stand on Yu Qianqiu's side quietly. The most important thing was that he had already sent a message back on the day when Hua Zongming and Yan Ji picked a fight with him. He told the Wen family not to get involved. Thinking about it now, he felt that he had foresight. At present, except for Wen Bai and himself, there were no other members of the Wen family here. It was not a problem for him to protect Wen Bai. As for the others, he didn't want to offend Yu Qianqiu, who had a powerful background for them. Therefore he didn't say anything and let Nongzhu speak. Mr. Nongzhu, I'm a cultivator from the Biqiu country. I heard that you have a good relationship with my ancestor. Please save my life for the sake of my ancestor. After this person spoke, the following words were immediately terrible. Mr. Nongzhu, I'm a cultivator from the Jadeite country. My ancestor also has a good relationship with you. All of a sudden, it was a mess. Nongzhu was stunned. She thought that it was a good thing to have many friends, but it turned out that it was complemented by troubles. This group of people had brought up their ancestors. They could ignore them, but they couldn't ignore their ancestors' faces. Guanzhongkai Yulandu, did the two of you grow up as eunuchs? Yu Qianqiu was still cursing from above. Nongzhu listened to the curses, which were getting more and more colorful. She pointed to the sky and said helplessly, the duel is not over yet. According to the rules, others can't interfere. As soon as she finished speaking, someone immediately begged, Mr. Nongzhu, please ask Yu Qianqiu to let us go. We don't want to watch the duel anymore. Let's go. Yes, we beg you. A person took the lead to kneel down. Immediately, a lot of people knelt down. Nongzhu coughed and waved her hand saying, get up. I'll try, but I don't know if it will work. You've seen what happened before. He didn't respect me at all. Maybe it's useless even if I ask. A group of people urged her to hurry up. They really couldn't stand it anymore. Nongzhu cleared her throat and shouted to the sky, Yu Qianqiu, have you cursed enough? If you don't hurry up, the people below will be roasted by your fire. Let them go first and let the innocent people go. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the sea of fire, was furious. Hearing this, he immediately cursed, innocent my ass. They all want me to die early. If you want me to let them go, I'll let them go unless my head grows on my butt. Damn. You reminded me of something. The people below all looked pale when they heard the first part of the sentence. When they heard the second part of the sentence, the light of hope appeared in their eyes. However, when they heard the second part of the sentence, they were all dumbfounded and regretted begging Nongzhu. They heard Yu Qianqiu shout loudly, Guanzhongkai Yulandu, quickly get out here for Laozi, otherwise the 3,000 people down there will all die because of you. While saying this, he controlled the blue flames at the edge of the sea of fire to fall to the ground. All of a sudden, the area within a radius of more than 10 miles was completely sealed, as if a blue hat was put on it. Yulan, who was at the edge of the sea of fire, was a little dumbfounded. Did this guy really dare to burn 3,000 cultivators to death? On the other side, Guanzhongkai directly denied that Yu Qianqiu dared to do so. He began to shout, Yu Qianqiu, are you tired of cursing? You'd better obediently put away the fire, and we'll pretend that nothing happened between us. If you want to use the lives of 3,000 cultivators to threaten me, then you're too naive. What does their life and death have to do with me? Big coward Guan, don't worry. When I'm tired of cursing, someone will naturally curse for me. I guarantee that your 18 generations of ancestors will never be able to reincarnate. After shouting, Yu Qianqiu shouted to the people below, everyone down there, did you hear that? It's not that I don't want to let you go, but Guanzhongkai thinks that your life and death have nothing to do with him. He's clearly hinting me to burn you to death. Fine, I'll let him get what he wants. No, Mr. Yu, please spare us. Mr. Yu, please have mercy. The panicked shouts from below became a mess. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, let me tell you, because of Guanzhongkai's words, I've already sealed the area within a radius of more than 10 miles with my blue fire. Flies can't fly out and ants can't crawl out of holes. Even those at the end of the passing tribulation will have to obediently wait for death. If you want to get out, curse Guanzhongkai and Yulan out, then I'll let you go. Otherwise all of you will die. Hearing this, the dozens of passing tribulation stage cultivators who wanted to see the result were instantly dumbfounded. They quickly raised their aura shields and flew through the sea of fire on the ground. It didn't take them long to cover the distance of more than 10 miles. When they reached the end, they found that it was just as Yu Qianqiu had said. The blue fire had sealed the area from top to bottom, and it seemed to be gradually shrinking. Looking at the deep blue wall of fire, it was probably not an ordinary thick wall. It was probably impossible to break out. They didn't dare to take the risk, so they turned around and flew back. Because going back and forth was equivalent to doubling the distance, they felt that they couldn't bear the roasting. When the crowd saw them flying back, they didn't need to ask to know. The result was just as Yu Qianqiu had said. One of the returning cultivators at the end of the passing tribulation stage stomped his feet and said, "Guanzhongkai, why don't you just shut up if you don't want to talk? That voice of yours is going to kill us." Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head at the crowd, saying, "The fire barrier is slowly shrinking. Once it closes in, we will definitely die." They immediately panicked and begged Yu Qianqiu to show mercy. "What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I have always been a merciful person. The people who harmed you are actually Guanzhongkai and Yulandu. Scold them hard, at least 100 times harder than when you scolded me. Scold those two cowards until they come out and fight me to the death. If I die, you will naturally be saved. If they die, I promise I will let you go. Damn it, why are you still hesitating? Be careful or I will roast you like suckling pigs." Unexpectedly, the one who scolded first was the cultivator at the end of the passing tribulation stage who had just left and came back stamping his feet. He roared, "Guanzhongkai, I am third brother Xen. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't want to fight, then come out and admit defeat. Don't King harm us. If you don't come out when I have the chance to go out, I will twist your head off and use it as a urinal. Come out now." Chapter 499. These words were quite shocking. Plus, his cultivation level was quite high, so his voice was naturally loud. Who was third brother Xian? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect that there would be such a powerful guy among his hostages. Although he didn't know who third brother Xen was, Nongzhu had told him about Guanzhongkai's identity. Xikongju, the eldest disciple of Yin Baikong, a late divine transformation expert, was also an early divine transformation expert, and Guanzhongkai was his disciple. This meant that Guanzhongkai was Yin Baikong's favorite disciple. But this third brother Xen actually dared to say that he would use Guanzhongkai's head as a urinal. Obviously he was not afraid of Guanzhongkai. Maybe he was even more powerful than Guanzhongkai. Guanzhongkai, who was at the end of the sea of fire, was startled. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said to himself, "Third brother Xen? Why is he here? I didn't see him at the start. Third brother Xian is also inside?" Yu Lan, who was at the other end, said to himself with a bitter smile, Guanzhongkai, why did you drag me into this? Things are getting out of hand now." He said this, forgetting his own greed. Looking at the mountain fire that was gradually spreading into the distance, the great forest was billowing with thick smoke. Yu Qianqiu did not know who third brother Xen was, but the two of them did. One of the four great men in the cultivation world, the world's #1 miracle doctor, the world's #1 beauty, a mid-stage divine transformation cultivator, and the master of Lingfang Valley. Lu Yanqing was his master. Third brother Xian had a total of 9 brothers. The strangest thing was that all 9 of them were born from the same mother. It was rare for one person to be pregnant with 9 twins at the same time. Because of this, the mother almost lost her life. Fortunately, she met Lu Yanqing, the world's #1 miracle doctor, and her life was saved. When the 9 brothers were born, their bodies were weak and their lives were hanging by a thread. It was Lu Yanqing who saved their lives. After that, Lu Yanqing found out that all 9 brothers were talented in cultivation. It was really a rare thing, so she took all 9 brothers as her disciples. After the 9 of them were born, although they were arranged according to the order of birth, their cultivation aptitude did not follow this order. The youngest of the 3, 9th elder Xen, was extremely talented and had already reached the early stage of soul formation. Looking at his cultivation speed, he actually had the potential to catch up to his master. The other 8 had also reached the end of the tribulation transcendence stage. Of course, this was not unrelated to the elixir that Lu Yanqing had refined. The 9 brothers always fought together. When one was bullied, the other 8 would take revenge together. Anyone who had anything to do with them would have a headache because of them. He was not afraid of these 9 people but of their master Lu Yanqing. As one of the 4 eccentrics, none of them were to be trifled with. Bai Changchun, who was ranked first, had an earth-shattering cultivation. No one dared to provoke him. When Lan Feng, who was ranked second, also had a frighteningly high cultivation. Except for Bai Changchun, no one was a match for him. Ancestor Nan Ming, who was ranked 3rd, and Lu Yanqing, who was ranked 4th. Although their cultivation was not very high, there were few in the world who dared to not give them face. People who begged them were like ducks. If they really wanted to offend these two, they did not need to do it themselves. They just needed to casually release the news. Most importantly, Lu Yanqing had a famous protector. It was one of the 4 eccentrics, Wen Lanfeng, who was ranked 2nd in the world in cultivation, who dared to bully Lu Yanqing. Wen Lanfeng did not even need to speak for her to vent his anger. How many people in the world dared to provoke Lu Yanqing? At the same time, what was the difference between provoking the 9 Xian brothers and provoking Lu Yanqing? Therefore, when he heard 3rd Elder Xian's scolding, Guan Zhongkai's forehead was full of sweat. Not to mention him, even his Grandmaster Yin Baikong had to be cautious. But no matter how afraid he was, it was not as important as his own life. If he rushed into this blue sea of fire, he could not guarantee that he would be able to come out. He immediately shouted, "Brother Xen, I have no enmity with you. You can't blame me. This has nothing to do with me. The fire was set by that guy. You should ask him to let you out." As soon as he said this, he heard 3rd Elder Xen shout, "Bullsh *T. If it's not your business, then whose business is it?" 2 late-stage tribulation transcendents shamelessly jumped out to fight a nascent soul stage. Halfway through the fight they stopped. If you don't want to fight, then just admit defeat. People scolded you for a long time and you did not come out. Do you have any shame? Let me tell you, you can either come over and continue fighting or admit defeat. You dare to run? If you kill me, I guarantee that even if you hide in the cornucopia, I will drag you out. No one can protect you. Guan Zhongkai was depressed. He did not know what to say. Regardless of whether 3rd Brother Xian scolded him or not, there was one thing that he was right about. If he really ran away and caused the death of this fellow, even if he hid in the World Commerce's headquarters cornucopia, the people of Spirit Fang Valley would still be able to find him. He was very clear about Grandmaster Yin Baikong's character. He bullied the weak and feared the strong. Moreover, there were many disciples and grand disciples in the late stage of tribulation transcendence. He would not offend Spirit Fang Valley for him and ruin the big plan. It was very likely that he would come out and apologize. It was really difficult to make a decision. He could not run away. If he went over now, he would be afraid of this deadly sea of fire. If he admitted defeat, he would not be able to raise his head in the cultivation world. What the F***ck is this? Guan Zhongkai laughed at himself. The reason why he jumped out to oppose Yu Qianqiu was because he heard that Yu Qianqiu killed his junior martial uncle who was also in the late stage of tribulation transcendence in the Chinese cultivation world. In fact, it was not for revenge. He just wanted to please Grandmaster Yin Baikong. Who would have thought that after just a few moves, it would become like this? Of course, Yu Qianqiu's 2 treasured sabers were also the reason why he made a move. On the other side, Yu Lan's intestines were green with regret. She sighed repeatedly and simply continued to maintain her silence. Even with Guan Zhongkai's background, he was afraid of 3rd Brother Xen, let alone him. Yu Qianqiu, who was above the sea of fire, was happy. From the words of the two, it seemed that Guan Zhongkai was really afraid of this guy. He immediately shouted, "Good scolding. Everyone else start scolding too. Don't worry, with so many people scolding together, he won't be able to tell who is who. Don't be afraid of his revenge." He then added, "I forgot to tell everyone the fire barrier is slowly closing in. We don't have much time left. Hurry up and scold." These words were well said. Everyone did not dare to scold too much because they were afraid that they would not be able to escape from Guan Zhongkai's revenge. After being reminded, everyone did not hold back and scolded loudly with righteous indignation. "Guan Zhongkai, you cowardly thing, come out. Yulan Du, shameless villain, if you don't have the guts, why did you come out and throw it?" More than 2,000 people were shouting angrily because hundreds of them had already fallen. It was really noisy. They were scolding all kinds of things, much more ruthless than when they were scolding Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was above the sea of fire, grabbed a handful of qi recovery pills and stuffed them into his mouth. He folded his arms and chewed slowly. His expression was not good and he was calculating in his mind. Since he was in the cultivation world, he could not spit out blood for nothing. Otherwise, everyone would bully him in the future. He wanted to see what those 2 guys were going to do. If they came, he would kill them. If they didn't, he could only let his subordinates suffer a little. If they wanted to cause trouble, they might as well make it bigger. People died every day, it was just a matter of how many people died. Nongzhu shook her head and sighed. A group of people were scolding Yu Qianqiu not long ago, and now they were helping Yu Qianqiu to scold people. Today's incident was considered to be a worthwhile trip. It was just that her ears were a little numb from the noise, when Rue and Wenbai looked at each other speechlessly. How did things turn out this way? Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were really unlucky. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were on the other end of the Sea of Fire, turned red and white. It would be a lie to say that they could not hear it. After being scolded like this, even if they were fine, they would have to avoid going out in the cultivation world in the future. Guan Zhongkai was infuriated when he suddenly heard the sound of rushing wind behind him. He turned his head and saw Mi Ruhai and Mi Ruchuan. His expression relaxed slightly. So it's Brother Guan. What's going on? Why? Mi Ruhai stopped halfway through his sentence. There was endless scolding coming from the Sea of Fire. There were all kinds of scolding, and the scolding was abnormally nasty. When the two of them noticed the abnormality, they were worried about their boss's safety, so they rushed over together. Who knew they would hear this? After looking at each other, they frowned when they saw Fangjing's constantly expanding mountain fire. Mi Ruhai said in a deep voice, "So many people are scolding you and Yulan. Brother Guan, could this Sea of Fire be caused by both you and Yulan?" "Brother Mi, don't misunderstand. How could I casually set off such a huge fire in Senior Hua's territory? Furthermore, it's near Dayang City." Guan Zhongkai waved his hands immediately. He was already in trouble, so how could he provoke Hua Zongming? What exactly happened? Mi Ruhai asked with a frown. "I've been unlucky for 8 lifetimes. I've encountered a jinx." "How unlucky?" Guan Zhongkai recounted the situation with a frown. The two brothers were dumbfounded. Their boss had come out to entertain the guests, and they had been staying in the palace. They never expected Yu Qianqiu to have already caused such a huge commotion. After coming to his senses, Mi Ruchuan said anxiously, "Brother Guan, are you saying that my brother is still in the Sea of Fire?" Guan Zhongkai's eyes lit up when he heard that. He nodded and said, "That's right. Mi Russian is indeed inside. Why don't you two force Yu Qianqiu to release him?" Mi Ruchuan immediately panicked when he heard that. He turned around and shouted, "Second brother, let's go and save big brother." After that, he was about to leave. "Wait." Mi Ruhai pulled him back and stared at Guan Zhongkai with a burning gaze. The latter avoided his gaze guiltily. He thought to himself that he was muddle-headed just now. He shouldn't have explained the situation so clearly. Otherwise, he could have used the two of them to force Yu Qianqiu. "Second brother, why are you still hesitating? Big brother is in danger," Mi Ruchuan said anxiously. Mi Ruhai said in a deep voice, "Didn't you hear what Brother Guan said just now? Yu Qianqiu held the lives of more than 3,000 people hostage. Big brother isn't the only one. If you and I barge in blindly and can force Yu Qianqiu to release him, it'll naturally be good. We can also solve the problem for Brother Guan. If we force Yu Qianqiu into a corner and kill ourselves together, then Big Brother and the 3,000 people would have died in vain. This responsibility isn't something you and I can bear." Chapter 500. The meaning in his words was clear. Mi Ruchuan, who was in a panic, immediately realized and said angrily, "Guan Zhongkai, you want to use us two brothers. Let me tell you, if anything happens to my big brother, no matter how powerful your World Chamber of Commerce is, don't even think about leaving Dayang Kingdom." Misunderstanding, there's no such thing. Guan Zhongkai smiled apologetically. His mouth was even more bitter than eating yellow lotus. The shock in Mi Ruhai's eyes did not fade away as he watched the sea of green flames that was slowly shrinking. Although the cultivators were used to seeing strange things, the scene was indeed spectacular. Mi Ruhai turned around and stared at Guan Zhongkai with his eagle-like eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Brother Guan, there are several thousand people cursing and swearing non-stop. You can't hide here. You have to solve it. Look at the cursing. If you don't come out, then there's no other way. Nothing can happen to my big brother." The last sentence was already faintly overbearing. Guan Zhongkai narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Mi Ruhai, are you threatening me?" As soon as he said this, Mi Ruchuan appeared behind him with a whoosh. The two brothers sandwiched him in the middle. If there was any disagreement, the two would probably fight. "Brother Guan is thinking too much," Mi Ruhai said unhurriedly. "Yu Qianqiu forced you to hide here and not go over. This shows that the power of this Sea of Fire is extraordinary. To put it bluntly, you may die if you go, am I right?" Seeing that Guan Zhongkai's face was calm and did not speak, he continued expressionlessly, "But if you just hide like this, Once something happens to third brother Xin, and Lu Yanqing finds Yin Baikong, I'm afraid that your grandmaster will not let you go. In my opinion, sometimes life is more important than face. Admitting defeat is also a way out. Brother Guan. Don't hesitate anymore, make a prompt decision. Guan Zhongkai looked back at Mi Rushan behind him. He knew that Mi Ruhai's words were to use peaceful means before resorting to force. If he didn't agree, Mi Ruhai would probably fight. Even if they didn't kill him, at least they wouldn't let him go. Just now, he had used teleportation more than a dozen times in a row, consuming a lot of his true essence. In addition, his flying sword artifact was also destroyed. He estimated that his chances of escaping from the hands of these two people were not high. After pondering for a while, Guan Zhongkai said in a deep voice, "Thank you for your advice, brother Mi. I will definitely remember this kindness and repay it in the future." The meaning in his words was worth pondering. Mi Ruhai smiled faintly, stepped aside, and made a gesture of invitation towards the sea of fire. Guan Zhongkai's chest heaved. He was forced into a corner. Gritting his teeth, he roared, "You Qianqiu, for the sake of the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world, I admit defeat. Put away the fire and let them go." The voices under the sea of fire stopped. Although everyone was cursing until their mouths were dry, their faces were filled with surprise. They were just waiting for Yu Qianqiu to release them. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword above the sea of fire, was stunned when he heard Guan Zhongkai's words. He didn't expect Guan Zhongkai to admit defeat. How could he do that? He hadn't even taken revenge for being injured. Yu Lan, who was on the other side of the sea of fire, also found it hard to believe, but Guan Zhongkai's voice confirmed it. He heaved a sigh of relief. Since Guan Zhongkai had admitted defeat, what else could he say? If word got out, Guan Zhongkai would be even more humiliated than him. He immediately shouted, "For the sake of the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world, I, Yu Lan, also admit defeat." Yu Qianqiu sneered. "You want to let things go like this after beating me up?" He roared, "Don't drag out the 3,000 fellow Taoists in the cultivation world to gain face. You know what you are. Also, I don't know what admitting defeat means." As soon as he said that, the people below were in chaos. They all thought that Yu Qianqiu was going to go back on his words. Third Xin, who was in the crowd, glared and roared, "Guan Zhongkai, Yulan, will you die if you speak clearly?" Yulan was a little better. After all, she was just following along. However, Guan Zhongkai was so angry that he gritted his teeth and roared, "Third Xin, I've already said it. It's that brat who didn't follow the rules. Third Xin, don't go too far. Do you really think that the World Commerce Association is afraid of your Lingfang Valley?" Third Xin immediately shouted back, "Stop bullsh asterisk ting. If you admit defeat, admit it openly. Don't beat around the bush. If the two of you admit defeat and Yu Qianqiu still dares to not let go, us brothers will be the first to not let him go. It has nothing to do with the two of you." Guan Zhongkai had always thought of himself as smart. He didn't expect that the people he met today were all playing tough with him. They didn't give him any leeway at all. He was so angry that his body trembled. Mi Ruhai smiled faintly and said, "Brother Mi, Third Xin is right. We've already said it like this. Why do you still care about the shivering? There's nothing wrong with making things clear." Mi Ruhai. Guan Zhongkai glared at him. He was so angry that he laughed and said good a few times. He then roared, "I admit defeat." Then he immediately turned around and flew away. Mi Ruchuan looked back and frowned. "Second brother, are we letting him go just like this? He seems to hate us. Why don't we take this chance to—" Mi Ruhai waved his hand and interrupted, "Don't care about him." The last three words have already made the World Commerce Association lose face. There's no need for us to do anything. Someone will naturally take care of him. I admit defeat. Yulando's voice also came faintly. Everyone under the sea of fire fell silent again. They were waiting for Yu Qianqiu's movement. If he still found an excuse, it would mean that he was deliberately trying to kill everyone. Damn it, coward. Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of saliva. He didn't think that they would be able to swallow their anger after being so overbearing. The other party directly shouted, "I admit defeat." If he still didn't let it go, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the various countries in the future. They wouldn't let him go. "I'll settle the score with you two bastards later." Yu Qianqiu slightly calmed the anger in his chest. He floated in the air and opened his arms. The azure flames quickly shrunk with him as the center and returned in an instant. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu discovered that the mountains below were a complete mess and the fire was still spreading. Finally seeing the light of day again, the group of people below finally felt relieved. Looking at Yu Qianqiu in the air, he quickly swooped down on his sword after withdrawing the azure flames. With a slanted drift, he charged into the raging flames burning in the mountains. A miraculous scene appeared. Wherever Yu Qianqiu went, the flames would reach out and wrap around him. In the blink of an eye, the flames would be sucked into his body. Not even a spark could be seen. Within a radius of several kilometers, Yu Qianqiu's figure could be seen flying on his sword. At this moment, everyone finally understood what Yu Qianqiu was doing. So he was extinguishing the fire. Everyone muttered. This guy was like a madman just now, using so many people's lives as a threat, but now he was doing such a thing. It seemed like he was just threatening Guanzhongcai and Yulando, and wouldn't really do anything. Everyone was just shocked. This was just their wishful thinking, but they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was not so kind. He had already made up his mind to kill all these people who had insulted him. If it weren't for Guanzhongcai and Yulando's retreat, this group of people would probably be crying and screaming now. In fact, Yu Qianqiu did not know why he did such a strenuous and unrewarding thing, but he did it anyway. It took nearly an hour to completely extinguish all the mountain flames. When he looked back, the surroundings were already scorched black. He returned on his sword. After landing, he glanced at everyone coldly. The group of people subconsciously stepped back. All of them were a little afraid of him. They had seen this guy kill more than a dozen people in a row, even those in the final stage of the heavens test. Especially the scene where he fought with Chu Dingfeng, it would be strange if they were not afraid. Now no one would say anything. Thousands of people were very quiet, watching him pick up a few storage bags on the ground. Of course, there were also people who were not afraid of him, and Third Xian was one of them. He approached, first bowed to Nongzhu and Wenrui, and then shouted to Yu Qianqiu, "Boy, you've got guts. How dare you treat the lives of thousands of people as a game?" Yu Qianqiu cast a glance at him. He looked exactly like a strong farmer, and his attire was also similar. His aura was similar to old ancestor Nanming. He asked indifferently, "Are you Third Xian?" Third Xian was stunned and then nodded, "Yes, I am Third Xian. Why, is there a problem?" Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out a storage bag and threw it on the ground, saying, "Let's begin." Third Xian was stunned and asked, "What for?" "Look at you, you don't seem to be convinced. The matter is not over yet, I will accept any challenge," Yu Qianqiu said. Third Xian paused and then waved his hand with a bitter smile, "Don't think too much. I'm not much stronger than Guanzhongcai, I can't withstand your monstrous fire." "Then what do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu asked. On the surface he was still cold, but in his heart, he admired this Third Xian. At least he was not so hypocritical. "Nothing else, I just want to have a drink or two with you. I don't know if you will give me face." Third Xian laughed. "Let's talk after I finish." Yu Qianqiu looked around and said in a deep voice, "Who else is not convinced? Come at me, I Yu Qianqiu will accept you at any time." I think that's it for today. If anyone still wants to fight, fight after leaving Daong Kingdom. Mi Russian said expressionlessly. The three brothers met up and stood together, and their eyes swept across the crowd. On the surface, his words sounded like he did not welcome the crowd to cause trouble in Daong Kingdom, but in fact he wanted to leave a fig leaf for the other countries. Who on the scene was confident that they could defeat Yu Qianqiu? Could it be that they were really going to be beaten by him to the point where no one else could participate? How embarrassing would that be? Those who came with me before, if you still want to return to Daong Palace, you might as well follow me back. That way you can avoid some unnecessary trouble. Mi Russian said this, and the three brothers flew away together. The few hundred people who came out also followed. Yu Qianqiu and the others were no exception. As for the rest of the people, including those who had fainted from the high temperature and were rescued, they also left. In the blink of an eye, the place became empty. The group of people returned to the hall of Daong Palace and it was much quieter. Yu Qianqiu found that Third Xian, who was originally not in the crowd, also came and followed him. Chapter 501. After the green flames in the distant sky disappeared, the people of Daong City felt that it was strange, but they gradually lost interest. After all, it was too far away and they did not know what had happened. It was just another topic of conversation. The entire Daong City quickly returned to peace, and the people's interest shifted back to the martial arts competition. The excitement of the rich and powerful easily attracted the attention of the common people. On the drill ground of the palace, more than 10 arenas were competing at the same time. Zhang Peng was in the Baiwan Nation's lineup, and he had already fought 5 matches. Ordinary children of rich and powerful families who practiced martial arts were no match for him. He was an old general who had fought on the battlefield, and his speed and eyesight after cultivation were far superior to mortals. He did not want to waste time with those mortals, so he beat his opponents to the ground with a few punches and kicks. He suppressed his cultivation or else someone would die. After he left the arena, he returned to the Baiwan Nation's lineup and felt bored. He was tall but he looked listless. Although he kept a low profile, his moves were too conspicuous. Not only did he attract the attention of the competitors from various countries, but he also alerted the spies in the palace. The news quickly reached Zhao Heng's ears in the imperial study. Zhang Peng? Zhao Heng looked at the eunuch in shock. The old eunuch with white hair on his temples smiled and said, "Master, you worry too much. This Zhang Peng is not Zhang Peng from Wuxia Nation, but the youngest son of an old general from Baiwan Nation. Because he cannot inherit the title of nobility, he came to Dayang Nation to find a way out." Zhao Heng nodded and asked, "You said that he won 5 matches in a row and he did not use more than 3 moves in any of them? With such good skills, even if he cannot inherit the title of nobility in Baiwan Nation, can't he find a good way out?" "Master, you know the situation in Baiwan Nation. It is normal for brothers to kill each other. I think it is because of this that he came to Dayang Nation," the old eunuch said respectfully. Zhao Heng thought for a while and did not say much. He only ordered, "Pay close attention to this person. If he is really a talent, try to recruit him." The same news quickly spread to the Lu Xiang house in the West Palace courtyard. The 3 sisters had also been paying attention to the news of the competition. When they heard that there was an outstanding figure called Zhang Peng, the 3 sisters looked at each other in dismay. How could there be such a coincidence? The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, hurriedly asked the servant who relayed the news about Zhang Peng's origins. After learning that he was from Baiwan Nation, the 3 of them heaved a sigh of relief. None of the hundreds of cultivators in the side hall spoke a word. All of them were looking at Yu Qianqiu. Everyone knew that after today's battles, Yu Qianqiu's name would be well known in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu and Xn Laosan were staring at each other. What made Yu Qianqiu depressed was that wherever he went, Yu Qianqiu would follow him. Whenever he sat down, Yu Qianqiu would sit beside him, smiling foolishly. How disgusting. Normally, other cultivators were not allowed to enter the palace, but the 3 Mi brothers obviously turned a blind eye to this guy. No one else had any objections either. It seemed that he really had some background. "Xn Laosan, why do you keep following me?" Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't stand it anymore and asked impatiently. Xn Laosan was a little puzzled and said, "Didn't we agree? I'll buy you a drink." "I don't think I agreed." Yu Qianqiu snorted. Xn Laosan waved his hand and said, "It's okay. It's not too late to agree now." Nongzhu, who had been quietly watching the show, giggled. She also didn't know why Xn Laosan kept following Yu Qianqiu, but it didn't stop her from watching the show. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "There are so many people here, why do you want to drink with me? What's the use of so many people? Just set a fire and it'll be over." Xn Laosan said loudly. Everyone in the room blushed at his words. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, this guy is a little heartless, but so many people are afraid of him. He paused and asked, "Xn Laosan, I don't drink with people I don't know for no reason. What's your background?" "You don't even know my background?" Xn Laosan acted as if he had heard something unbelievable. Yu Qianqiu showed a look of disdain and said, "You don't look like a spirit-severing expert." Xn Laosan ignored his sarcasm and patted his chest. He said proudly, "I come from Lingfang Valley. My master is the Valley Master of Lingfang Valley." Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up and said, "Your master is the world's most beautiful woman, Lu Yanqing? What do you want?" Xn Laosan immediately became alert. He had seen this person's eyes and tone in many people who had evil intentions towards his master. It's nothing, just casually asking." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. But this guy kept staring at him. He was full of thoughts. Maybe he had some ulterior motives. At this moment outside the hall, Mi Russian walked in. He cupped his hands towards the crowd and said, "Everyone, today's competition ends here. We have already selected 100 winners from each country, and they will continue to compete in the next few days." After saying this, he stopped. His meaning was obvious. He was sending the guests off. No one wanted to stay here for a long time. Not only were they not allowed to walk around, they were also not allowed to watch the competition. Of course, everyone understood that this was because they were afraid that the cultivators would secretly help the contestants of their country and interfere with the fairness of the competition. The group of people began to disperse and walked out of the side hall, returning to their respective protected targets. Among the contestants, some were happy and some were worried. Those who were happy were naturally successful, and those who were worried were naturally eliminated. After returning to Baiwan, everyone got on the carriage and went back. In the carriage, Yu Qianqiu saw Zhang Peng's dejected look and asked curiously, "Zhang Peng, what's wrong? Is there anyone who is your match?" "No, I won 5 matches in a row." Zhang Peng said sullenly and then smiled bitterly, "Master, can we not compete? It's really boring." Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongzhu and Furong in the carriage and said, "Let's talk about it later." After the group of people returned to Baiwan's embassy, they had just entered the small courtyard when they suddenly saw a person flashing through the air. Nongzhu, who was the fastest to react, grabbed the person's neck before he even landed. This person was none other than third brother Xan. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This guy actually followed them here. Zhang Peng looked puzzled, not knowing who this person was. Third brother Xn, whose face was red from being choked, said intermittently, "Senior Nongzhu, please have mercy." Nongzhu sneered, "Third brother Xn, you really don't want face when I'm trying to save you. You actually dared to break into my residence without permission. Others might be afraid of your master, but I'm not. Believe it or not, if I cripple you, your master will at most scold me." After that, she threw him aside and rolled on the ground a few times. Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. In the hands of a soul-forming cultivator, a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation was like a chicken. It was very difficult for him to defeat a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation. This was the gap between them. Third brother Xang gritted his teeth and got up. He bowed and apologized to Nongzhu. It was true that third brother Xian and his brothers could do whatever they wanted in the cultivation world because of their master, but there were indeed people they were afraid of. Needless to say, there was the most powerful master in the world who almost flattened Lingfang Valley. Mr. Nongzhu was also someone they could not afford to offend. If he taught them a lesson, their master would not say anything. Moreover, Wen Lanfeng would not necessarily look for Nongzhu to settle scores with. "Tell me, what are you doing here?" Nongzhu shouted. Third brother Xn answered obediently, "Senior, I'm here to have a drink with him." He pointed at Yu Qianqiu. "Don't talk nonsense with me." Nongzhu glared at him and shouted, "Get out of here." Third brother Xn trembled in fear. Before he could turn around, he saw Wen Rui teleporting. Wen Rui glanced at third brother Xn and said to Nongzhu anxiously, "Sir, I have to go back to Baiwan country. I'm afraid I can't accompany you." Nongzhu frowned and said, "What's wrong? You look so anxious. Did something happen in Baiwan country?" The others also looked at him. Wen Rui paused and shook his head. "To tell you the truth, our ancestor has come out of seclusion." Nongzhu and third brother Xn, who was secretly eavesdropping, screamed at the same time. Furong and Zhang Ping did not know who they were. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Has Senior Wen Lanfeng come out of seclusion?" Wen Rui nodded silently. Third brother Xin, on the other hand, had teleported away with a swish sound. He was suspected of informing Wen Rui. Nongzhu smiled bitterly, "This is troublesome. Wen Lanfeng, don't be impulsive." Then she pointed at Wen Rui and said anxiously, "Wen Rui, go back as soon as possible and find a way to stop Wen Lanfeng. Don't let him go to the demon domain now. Old Bai has urgent matters to attend to. If he goes there now, he will be courting death." Furong and Zhang Peng looked at each other and did not know what they were talking about. Yu Qianqiu understood. He knew that when Lanfeng went into seclusion after being defeated by Master. Now that he came out, he would probably go to Master to fight again. Wen Rui nodded and turned around. He turned back and said with a solemn expression, "Sir, I have something to ask you. I hope you can tell me the truth." "Say it." Nongzhu frowned and did not know what he was hesitating about. Wen Rui was puzzled. "Our ancestor has been in seclusion for 100 years. When he comes out, his cultivation must have improved greatly. But from what you said, do you still think that our ancestor is no match for Bai Changchun? How can a grain of rice compete with the bright moon?" Nongzhu sighed and said, "Ordinary experts at the late stage of transforming spirit realm, no matter how high their cultivation is, can make people feel a bottom line. But Bai Changchun always gets stronger when he meets strong opponents. His cultivation is so profound that it is unfathomable. He is a powerful existence that cannot be judged by common sense. Although I don't know how high Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is after coming out of seclusion, I know that if he provokes Bai Changchun again, he will lose his life. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.